If you think you know the basics of ancient Christianity well enough, skip ahead to the hour 16 mark.
Good morning, Christian warriors! Welcome to the Pastor Clifton Ministry. My name is Pastor Clifton, and of course my website is PastorCliftonMinistry.com. On my website there are a bunch of buttons where you could donate if you find it within your hearts to help my family and I. And there are links to the book that I wrote, A Return to Ancient Christianity, which is available through Amazon, physical copies only. Because folks, when the lights go out, you're going to want physical books to read. Also on the website, at the very bottom of the page, there are 2 ancient scrolls for your free download of the Bible in PDF format. You click on the Old Testament scroll or the New Testament scroll, and the download will begin automatically. It's a zip file, so you just got to unpack that zip file and you get all 66 books of the Bible in the original languages. That's right, Christian warriors, in the ancient Hebrew and the ancient Greek for the Old Testament and the New Testament, respectively. And those original languages that the Bible was written in is set right beside the modern translations, and that does include the King James Version. Yes, the King James Version is a modern translation. It does not matter that it's been taught for 1,600 years. There was an ancient Christianity that preceded Catholicism, Roman Catholicism, back prior to 70 AD, and all the way back as far as 800 BC. That means before Christ. Yes, Christian warriors, it is not my opinion that there was ancient Christianity. It's a literal fact. And that's what I'm bringing back today, Christian warriors. I'm bringing back the ancient teachings for all of you to hopefully accept so you can come to know God's truth and God's law so we can more effectively do His will on this beautiful planet He created. So welcome newcomers. All you newcomers to Christianity, you're very lucky. Welcome. Welcome to the Pastor Clifton Ministry where we teach ancient Christianity. So you guys are lucky because you don't have to beat down those walls of ego. That is the silly jabbering in people's heads going, I'm not wrong, I just need to entertain myself 100% of the time and accept fantasy and lie to myself. That's all coming from ego, and Satanists are the ones that push ego to the front. That is the core of their religion. Or all of that emotional conditioning coming to you from all of those institutions of false worldly authority. And really, when we get down to it, down to the basics, emotional conditioning is based in fear. Fear of not having approval from the people around us, fear of discomfort. All of the emotional conditioning is based in fear. You don't have to beat all those things down. So you can come to know God's truth and God's law through the tradition of ancient Christianity as a clean slate. Very lucky. Welcome. And welcome to all of the Catholics and modern Christians that may be catching these sermons. You are always welcome here at the Pastor Clifton Ministry to learn ancient Christianity, what came first. And I love all of you guys on a spirit level, just like I love all of God's children. So you are always welcome here. You see, Christian warriors, newcomers, Catholics and modern Christians, we do have to work together against Satanists on this planet, because the Satanists all know how to work together, despite all of their various denominations in their religion. They all know how to work together and have been doing so for millennia, and all enacting their dark will through their families, generation after generation. While they're doing that and seeing all of their dark will come to fruition, all of the 400 plus denominations of Christianity out there are squabbling amongst each other and pointing the finger at everybody and saying, oh, you're not holy, you are holy. All of that infighting, Christian warriors, newcomers, and Catholics and modern Christians, is what makes that hell world out there, because no one has stood up to these Satanists on this planet yet. It is our responsibility to do so. So Catholics and modern Christians, If this sounds different to you, what I'm teaching, that's because it is. It is almost unrecognizable, ancient Christianity, when compared to what has happened to Christianity over the centuries. Yes, the Bible is a state-approved document that does not threaten the parasite class's control. Not my opinion. Our Bible was censored and edited in 325 AD, 381 AD, and 1611 AD. All three of those times they were continuing to censor and edit the Bible to make sure that it was a state-approved document safe for the parasite class to continue treating us like slaves. Not my opinion. This is not a matter of belief. This is a matter of accepting God's truth. And it makes me angry that the parasite class and Satanists have done this to my religion, which is Christianity, ancient Christianity. Yeah, it makes me angry. I can't believe that they dared to mess with our scriptures like that. And most of what we do at the Pastor Clifton Ministry is unwind all of this censoring and editing so we can get down to the bottom of what the Bible actually says, using the original languages, of course. And along the way, I will be teaching you what the ancient Christians taught newcomers. If you just can't stamp out your ego and your emotional conditioning and your fear, then what can I say, Christian warriors? These sermons are the meat for warriors, not the milk for babes, as the ancients used to say. So if you want the milk for babes and you want people talking to you softly and saying exactly what you want to hear and propagating the message that has not changed that hell world out there in over 2,000 years, then there are millions of other pastors and priests that you could listen to out of the 400 plus denominations of Christianity that all sprouted from the Roman Catholic Church and the Church of England. So be my guest, go listen to what you want to hear and have someone talk to you all softly. But Christian warriors, my background does not allow me to talk to you guys like babies. I'm talking to you like warriors because that's what you are. God didn't make slaves or babies. He created warriors. We got to really appreciate our time, our minutes with all of our loved ones, our friends and family, maybe the pets that we're in stewardship of. Don't waste these minutes fighting with them and arguing with them and stuff like that. They're either ready to accept God's truth or not. You don't back down. Through a force of agape love, you keep bringing the truth to them. One of the most misconstrued teachings that our honored teacher Jesus Christ brought to us is the turn the other cheek parable that he gives us. People think that has to do with being a doormat for Satanists, to just walk all over them and just violate their God-given rights without any bit of self-defensive force. No. Turn the other cheek, the parable that Jesus Christ gives us, has to do with teaching our loved ones, our family, our friends, anyone we can reach. Teaching them God's truth and God's law and what his will is to do here. And if they slap that key of understanding out of your hand, or they slap you in the face, figuratively, not actual physically, and tell you to get away from him, bringing God's truth. How dare you bring God's truth to me? If they do that, then you turn the other cheek, pick up that key off the ground they slapped out of your hand, and bring God's truth and law to them again, over and over again. Don't give up on your friends, your loved ones, anyone that you can reach that you think that they can actually get this stuff. Ancient Christian teachings. You turn the other cheek, that means to keep bringing the key of knowledge to people, whether they slap your hand or slap your face about it, figuratively, not physically, of course. Just remember, Christian warriors, that accepting Christ has nothing to do with belief, it has nothing to do with taking allegory literally, it has nothing to do with taking the silly myth of Sol Invictus that was slapped over our honored teacher Jesus Christ's life, very literally. You don't have to do any of that to accept Christ. All you have to do is behave with care, with nonviolence, behave with self-defense force. That's it. These sermons are for spiritual seekers who are ready for Christianity to make sense again. That's right, Christian warriors. We are not going to just believe in allegory, take allegory literally, and act like exoteric believers of Christianity. We are going to be the esoteric spiritual seekers, knowing the inner truth. Mostly because the way that exoteric modern Christianity and Catholicism are taught to people, it's driving people away from Christianity. It's not making sense to people who can think rationally and think critically and who do not want to take allegory literally. And people who do not just want to believe, they actually want to know things. And that was a big cornerstone of ancient Christianity, is knowing things, not believing things. You know it or you don't know it. So Christian warriors, it is time for Christianity to make sense again. That's why I'm bringing the ancient teachings back. And please share with anyone with the ears to hear, as the ancients used to say. People who are about to leave Christianity because it doesn't make sense to them and they don't want to take allegory literally and meet all of these demands by false institutions of authority, including those in religious circles. Those people who might go the wrong way just by abandoning spirituality altogether just because of the way modern Christianity and Catholicism are taught, share this with them, so that you can bring them back into our fold of Christian warriors. You see, Christian warriors, there is a big difference between exoteric belief and esoteric knowledge. Ancient Christianity hinged on esoteric knowledge, not belief, knowledge. A lot of the esoteric teachings of ancient Christianity come through our honored teacher, Jesus Christ, in his words and deeds in the New Testament of our Bible. Yes, of course, there's censorship and editing in there, but they didn't catch everything, Christian warriors. And thank God for those people that kept a lot of the old esoteric knowledge of ancient Christianity in our Bibles. So there is a big difference between exoteric and esoteric. That is EXO versus ESO. Exoteric is outer teachings, taking allegory literally, believing the Sol Invictus myth slapped over the life of our honored teacher, Jesus Christ, and all of the silly trappings that don't really make sense to people who think rationally and critically about what they're being told. That is exoteric belief. Now, esoteric knowledge are the inner teachings, and our honored teacher, Jesus Christ, confirms that he is teaching ancient Christianity in parables. Where does he say this? Well, it's Mark 4:11. And we'll read Mark 4:11, and he said unto them, this is Jesus talking, unto you it is given to know the mystery of the kingdom of God. And the kingdom of God is not heaven in this verse. The kingdom of God means God's truth and God's law, knowing those two things. So Jesus says, unto you it is given to know the mystery of the kingdom of God. But unto them that are without, that means people outside of esoteric inner teachings, the exoteric believers, but unto them that are without, all these things are done in parables. And what does that mean, Christian warriors? I know you know, but all of the newcomers and Catholics and modern Christians that may not know what that means, it means that Jesus is confirming that he is weaving esoteric knowledge of ancient Christianity into his words and his deeds. He is encoding them for us to learn. Mark 4:11. And for any of those people who are hard-headed, got their egos in the way, emotional conditioning and fear running their thoughts, their lives, everything, their emotions especially, a friendly challenge to all those people who practice the idolatry of viewing the Bible or crosses as magical items in and of themselves, like out of some fantasy movie. For people who still practice that idolatry, on your screen right now are around a dozen verses out of the Old Testament and the New Testament that are all pro-slavery, pro-racism, and pro-false authority. All of those verses are in our Bibles. When I brought this to a modern Christian that I know personally in my family, she didn't even know that they were in there, which just goes to show you, Christian warriors, that most Christians out there and Catholics have never read their Bible cover to cover, so they don't know what's in there. So take those verses that I showed you earlier and bring them down to the pastors and the priests that are telling you differently, and have them try and reconcile why God seems to be condoning slavery, racism, and the absurd notion that false institutions of authority on our physical planet have anything to do with his law. Have them reconcile those verses that I showed you with their famous statement that they always give the exoteric believers in modern Christianity and Catholicism of the Bible is the immaculately inspired Word of God. Now, if it were inspired, and if it were immaculate, that means divinely clean, then there would be no such verses that are pro-slavery in our Bible. God does not condone slavery. God has given us all equal, God-given rights. We are born with them. Your body's your property. There's proof right there, physical proof, that you have physical, God-given rights, property rights, that you are born with. And we all have the same God-given rights as any other being in God's beautiful reality. We all have the same God-given rights. No one has more, no one has less, and you can't vote your way into giving people more or less. And what that means, Christian warriors, is that government does not decide who gets more God-given rights and less God-given rights. So God obviously does not condone slavery, racism, or the authoritarian parasite class ruling over us like kings and we're all slaves or something. God does not condone any of that behavior. Of course not, Christian warriors. All right, Christian warriors, it's going to be a great sermon, and it's going to be a great Sunday. It's always a great Sunday. Why do we even do it? Why do we come together like this on Sunday with our family and our friends? It's to praise God, not for His benefit. You're not going to get anywhere trying to flatter God. God the Father, the Creator that set all things into motion, the eternal force of love, isn't like us Adam human beings. So if you're trying to flatter God with praise, you're getting nowhere fast, folks. God is not some narcissistic authoritarian stroking his non-existent ego over people praising him all day. No, Christian warriors, we do not come to God praising Him for His benefit. We do so for our benefit. We show gratitude to God when we praise Him, God the Father. And why do we do that, Christian warriors, every Sunday, getting together with our family and our friends and maybe the animals that we're the stewards of? We do so because gratitude takes the place of complaint. Our prayers should not read like a giant Christmas list. And of course, Christian warriors, we do not come to God the Father like a begging, groveling slave. God created warriors, not slaves. Now, in the ancient times, prior to 70 AD and as far back as 800 BC, when a newcomer would come to an ancient Christian and say, I want to be a Christian, what that teacher would tell that newcomer is, first, you must stop accepting fantasy and stop lying to yourself. Those were the first two steps that a newcomer would have to tackle and defeat inside his own psychology before he was even taught anything in esoteric ancient Christianity. Now, what is accepting fantasy and who is providing the fantasy? Well, of course, Christian warriors, we see from that hell world out there on God's beautiful planet, twisting it into this hell world where we're all running around worshiping money as God, and even worse nonsense than that in the last decade. But if you look closely at that hell world out there, it is because people have accepted fantasy. And who sells fantasy all the time? It's Satanists, Christian warriors. Satanists and all their little cabal minions. They've been selling fantasy nonstop, and they do not run out of buyers, Christian warriors, and that's too bad. So the first thing that the teacher of ancient Christianity would get the newcomer to tackle and defeat within himself, within his own psychology, is to stop accepting fantasy. And instead of accepting fantasy, you start coming to know God's truth. Not believe it, know it. You come to know God's truth and God's law, understand how they operate, and then start doing God's will on this planet, in the physical. The work is to be done here, Christian warriors, not somewhere else. And no, God isn't going to come down and fix everything. There is no savior but moral behavior. And that is the very crux of ancient Christianity. So if you think that the world out there is some other way than it actually is, that's you accepting fantasy. Now, the second thing that a newcomer would have to tackle and defeat within his own mind and his emotions and his actions would be to stop lying to his or herself. And that means that when you look into a mirror and you are telling yourself that you are some other way than you actually are, that's you lying to yourself. And you have to stop doing that, because those two things must be tackled before you even understand. You can't come to know God's truth and God's law through a lens of fantasy and lying to yourself. You can't do it. And that's what the ancient Christian teachers knew. And that's why they required it of their newcomers to tackle those two things first. Stop accepting fantasy. Stop lying to yourself. Yes, it's uncomfortable, because lies sound nice and pretty and they make people feel good, but truth is the sword. Just like Jesus Christ says in Matthew 10:34 through 38, the sword is what cuts through lies. That's why it feels uncomfortable. You know what, Christian warriors? God's truth doesn't feel uncomfortable to those who do not accept fantasy and do not lie to themselves. God's truth is a relief to those people. If you feel uncomfortable when confronted with God's actual truth, then there's a huge problem there, wouldn't you say? But, you know, Christian warriors, I'm not as stingy with these ancient Christian teachings because they must be propagated widely. The reason why we got the hell world out there is because these teachings were just completely stifled by the early Roman Catholics and the Church of England, and they haven't been taught for centuries, and that's really too bad, which is why I'm bringing it back, Christian warriors. And I do not do so for money, obviously. My family and I are poor, come from poor families, and no one's helping me do this work at all. So I'm clearly not doing it for money. I'm bringing you these ancient Christian teachings because it must be understood out there. We're looking down the barrel, Christian warriors, of complete and total slavery of us by the parasite class, which are mostly Satanists, cult-affiliated ones if they're not just cabal minions like orcs. We are looking down that barrel. It is down to the wire. These teachings must be brought forth again. So I'm not going to demand that everyone stop accepting fantasy and stop lying to themselves, because I'm going to teach this stuff anyway. And no, I'm not doing it for money. I don't have a mansion and I don't want one. I think it's disgusting that pastors and priests out there would live such lavish lifestyles when they could use those resources to help others instead of increasing their comfort level past 100%. And I am also not bringing you these teachings because of popularity, because guess what? I get attacked more from Catholics and modern Christians in emails, comments, and what have you. I get attacked by those people more than I do from Satanists. Satanists are actually laughing at me that I'm actually trying to bring these teachings of God's truth and God's law to people who are so firmly set in their system of emotional conditioning, so firmly set in their egos, that they cannot even hear it. So I'm not going to wait for you guys to stop accepting fantasy and stop lying to yourself. I'm going to go ahead and teach you this stuff anyway. So let's go through the basics of ancient Christianity, just to reiterate, so all of you Christian warriors can get nuance to your understanding of God's truth and God's law and what His will is to do. And most importantly, for all those newcomers who don't understand what I'm talking about. God set all reality into motion, and His will has already been done in the form of His immutable law, which is what governs everybody's actions, everyone's behavior. It even governs inanimate stuff, like fire being hot would be part of God's law. This is all observable, testable. You can come to know it. It does not have to do with belief, God's truth and God's law. And that was a big cornerstone of ancient Christian teachings. You come to know this stuff. You don't believe it. You know it. So when God created all of His beautiful reality, He split Himself up into trillions of guardian angels, His Holy Spirit. And all of those guardian angels are our internal connection to God, the Father. We all have God's Holy Spirit inside of us. Nobody can be separate from God. Even the most vile Satanists can't be disconnected from God, and they hate it. I kind of find that funny, but even the most vile Satanists can't be disconnected from God. There is nothing that you can do in this reality without having your connection to God. We can't sever the connection to God. It cannot be stolen, sold. I know what you've been taught. Leave your programming at the door. Guardian angel, the Holy Spirit, God's Holy Spirit, the soul. Sloppy terminology. I never say soul, but even that can't be severed. Your connection to God can't be cut. You can stop listening to your guardian angel and God by extension, but you can't get rid of the connection. Cannot be cut, cannot be stolen, cannot be sold. I know what you've been taught. Leave your programming at the door. All that stuff is just silly fan fiction nonsense. God's Holy Spirit is inside of you. The guardian angel, the real us. This is to express and experience inside His reality. God created all of His beautiful reality so He could express Himself through us and experience through us His creation. That's the whole point. It's typical in movies where people will go to the wise man on top of the mountain and they'll ask, what is the point of life? And very simply, the point of life, as far as God's original plan, which is not predeterminism, the plan is to see if all of the guardian angels out there will, in their respective experiences that they're going through this physical and non-physical existence, as creatures with amnesia, all God's children, the whole point is for us to come to know His truth, His law, so we can do His will, to act morally. That's the point of life. I know we got a whole bunch of challenges and problems coming at us from Hellworld out there. But if we're being honest with ourselves, which we should be, how many of those problems are due to our own careless or immoral behavior? Yes, there's a lot of problems coming at us from Hellworld and struggles. Seriously, guys, I'm so dirt poor that I got nothing but Hellworld problems. However, I've cleaned up my act enough to at least weed out the stuff that I used to be causing myself, all the problems I used to be causing myself. Christian Warriors, you got to do this too. So there's a lot of problems coming at us from Hellworld. Some of them we have to find out if we are doing it ourselves, to ourselves, and stop doing it. Ancient Christians would teach the newcomer the truth, God's truth, that there are 3 ways to express ourselves in God's beautiful reality, and that is through thoughts, emotions, and actions. There are no other ways to express yourself in God's beautiful reality. It all comes down to thoughts, emotions, and actions. Now, all 3 of those things can be good or evil, yes. But when we're talking about morality, only action can be moral or immoral. These are ancient Christian teachings. So all 3 can be good or evil. Yes, good or bad, right? But only one of those 3 expressions, thoughts, emotions, actions, only one can be considered moral or immoral, and that is action. It's an objective thing, morality. Morality is action. That's how we can tell that people don't get to decide what moral and immoral are. They are not figments of someone's perspective. They are action. And we all know objectively when a physical wrongdoing has taken place. That's because morality is action. That's how we know that it's not in the minds of everybody's sloppy perspective. It is action. It's objective. Now, there are 2 dynamics that our thoughts, emotions, and actions work through. This is ancient Christian teachings coming down to you, Christian Warrior, and I'm going to keep reiterating it every week because I don't think people really firmly grasp these concepts. And it takes repetition, I know. So there are thoughts, emotions, and actions. Those are our expressions in God's beautiful reality. There are 2 dynamics that those 3 expressions work through. And those dynamics are love and fear. The opposite to love is not hate. That's Satanist misdirection, Satanist conditioning. Yeah, I've heard it repeated too. I know exactly what all of you have been taught. Leave your programming at the door. The opposite to love is fear. God is the creator that set all things into motion. God the Father is the eternal force of love. And what ancient Christians would teach the newcomer is that love would come in 3 categories. Those 3 types of love are, from least important to most important, eros, which is sexual, philos, which is love of friends and family, and agape, the most important one, which is love of God's truth, knowledge of God's truth and His law, and doing His will, no matter how uncomfortable it is, and no matter if you get approval from people around you or not. Agape love is knowing God's truth, knowing God's law, and doing His will, no matter how comfortable you are, and no matter if you're getting approval from others. That's what agape love is, the most important one. Self-defensive force is an act of agape love. It is not an action based in fear. It is respecting that you have God-given rights. You're born into your body. You have property rights. And if someone tries to violate, cause violence, violate your God-given rights by causing harm on you, if you are the innocent party, then you do have a God-given right to defend yourself. And that right, that expression of action, self-defense, is an action based in agape love. Now here's a gotcha question that materialists and atheists think they got a gotcha question. When they pose this question to modern Christians and Catholics, they say, well, why did God create Satan? To torture himself? Is that one thing that's out of God's control? And this is what an ancient Christian would tell that person. There is no gotcha in that question. God created Satan because Satan is the adversary. That's what Satan means in Hebrew. Adversary. The adversarial force. The adversary is fear, decay, and destruction. All 3 of those things. That's what Satan is. It is not a silly character with goat legs, horns, and a pitchfork, twirling his mustache trying to ruin all of God's plans. That is not Satan. Satan is not one entity. Satan is the force of fear, decay, destruction. And there are tons of entities, physical and non-physical, that are ruled by Satan. And they try and propagate Satanism. They propagate fear, using control. So yes, there are non-physical entities out there that are Satanists, and some of them may even look like that silly character. But Satan is way worse than just one silly anthropomorphized character. Satan is way worse than that. Satan is a force of fear, decay, destruction. And the reason why God created Satan is so that we could have free will in His reality. There is no predeterminism in His reality. All of the conditions out there in the physical and the non-physical, all of those conditions are created by us, or they are created by inanimate objects smashing into each other through God's law. And all of that action, if it's not coming from a conscious being, all of that action is being governed by God's law as well. So it comes down to our care to be careful about what types of inanimate object action is going on out there. It comes down to our care. Conscious beings need to care. Be careful. So all of those conditions out there, Christian warriors and newcomers, are all created by us. That is the whole point of God's reality, is that we are setting the conditions by understanding His truth and understanding His law and doing His will. It is in our firm control. So Satan is fear, and that is the mechanic that gives us consequences for immoral behavior or just careless behavior, stupid behavior. So if you're careless or you're being immoral, you're going to get consequences from that force, Satan. That's why it was created. Free will. There is no predeterminism in God's beautiful reality. There isn't. I know what you guys have been taught. Leave your programming at the door. There is no predetermined course. There is no fate. Nothing in our reality is meant to be. Everything is made to be. These are ancient Christian teachings because they understood God's truth and God's law. Does not matter what's been taught for the last 1,600 years. That's modern teaching. So if we behave, that is using our three expressions, thoughts, emotions, and actions. Actions most important because that's what set the conditions out there in physical and even non-physical reality. Action is what sets the conditions, the events. If we behave through love, then we get a condition of order and freedom. If we behave through love, agape love, that includes self-defensive force. That is why there's a hell world out there, Christian warriors, is because people have been taught to just pray in a corner and escape into heaven, and that's not how God's system of spiritual progression works. We have to do His will here. That's why it says, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." That means it is our responsibility to do God's will, to know His truth, know His law, do His will. No Savior is coming to fix things for you. We have to come to an understanding of His truth and His law to actually change things out there in that world. If we behave through love, then we get order and we get freedom. Now, if we behave through fear, acting through fear, your thoughts, emotions, and actions all based in fear, then what Satan does is give negative consequences for fear-based, immoral, or stupid, careless behavior. And when we behave in fear out there in God's beautiful reality, we get a condition of chaos and slavery, because there are all sorts of Satanists out there who are ready to steer around dumb animals. And that's what they've been doing for a long time. They do so through false institutions of authority, like government, like religion, like publishing houses, licensing boards. All of those can be weaponized, and I think we've all seen that pretty clearly in the last 3 years during this attempted fake pandemic. You saw that fear was used as a leverage and control was always the answer. You saw this. These are Satanists operating as usual, creating that hell world out there, perpetuating it. And if we do not act in self-defensive force, not pray in a corner and hope a Savior comes by, then the hell world out there continues. Yes, prayer is powerful, Christian warriors, don't get me wrong. I know it's powerful. However, to make conditions manifest themselves out in physical reality, we're going to have to take physical action coupled with those prayers. Because Christian warriors, what they've done in hell world is create false institutions of authority. Like I said, they are religious, quote, authorities, government, quote, authorities, licensing board, quote, authorities, publishing house, quote, authorities. All of those institutions are false authority. There's only one authority in God's beautiful reality, and that is His immutable law. And guess what, Christian warriors and newcomers? The reason why we have a hell world out there is because of the command positions in all of those institutions of false authority. These sloppy, bioengineered human bodies, we have psychopathy cropping up in our human genome at around 3% at any given time out of 7 billion on the planet. Psychopaths. Basically insect people. They have the minds of insects. No feeling, no remorse, no nothing. The only thing they care about is not getting caught and not dying. They're just insects. They're less than human beings, really. And what do Satanists and psychopaths sprint for? All the jobs that they want are those command positions of institutional authority. Those are all the jobs that they want. So you are guaranteed, for any 3% psychopathic, born psychopath, who's smart enough to chase what he wants and knows exactly in his or her insect mind how to get things done and how to make his will manifest, he or she is going to use those command positions of institutional authority. They sprint to those positions. Satanists, psychopaths, cabal minions, all of them sprint to those positions. And that's why we got the hell world out there. And for a couple millennia, no one has said anything against it. No one's done anything against it. No one's fought back. Nobody has used their God-given right of self-defensive force. Even in a country, our United States of America, no, it is not the government. Our country is our countrymen and our countrywomen beside us. That's our country. Even in this country, we have codified in our own documents that we have a right to self-defensive force. And no one uses it. So Christian warriors, we are in firm control of the conditions, the events out there in God's reality. His physical reality is being built by our actions or our inactions, whether they're moral or immoral, whether they're based in fear or based in love. All of those conditions are being set out there. It is our responsibility. We are in firm control of what happens. There is no predeterminism. There is no fate. So what is God's truth? God's truth, very simply, as was taught by ancient Christians to newcomers, God's truth is what has happened and what is happening now. There is nothing mystical about it. I know there's a bunch of New Age religions just feeding people a bunch of nonsense lately, saying that the truth can't be known and the truth is just tied to perspective. No, there is such a thing as objective truth. It is what has happened and what is happening now. Yes, the truth can be known. God's truth can be known. Even our honored teacher, Jesus Christ, knows this to be true and teaches. Ancient Christianity teaches the newcomers. It was missed when they were censoring and editing the Bible. Either that or the parasite class thought people were too dumb to get esoteric, inner Christian teachings. They may have thought that we were too dumb to even grasp it. But remember, in Mark 4:11, where our honored teacher Jesus Christ says that he is wrapping esoteric teachings in parables. People who are Christians after the ancient teachings, people who know the esoteric inner teachings, they understand the parables. Those who are without, those who believe exoteric, silly stuff like taking allegory literally, or worshiping the Sol Invictus myth that was slapped over our honored teacher Jesus Christ's life, all of that is exoteric belief. None of it is ancient, esoteric Christian knowledge. So we know that Jesus is talking to us in parables. And with that knowledge, when we read John 14:6, Jesus says, Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. And a lot of people think, oh, this means that we have to praise Jesus as like a sort of answering machine and he'll get our message to God. No. You pray to God the Father. Your relationship is with God the Father. No intermediaries, no teachers, no saints, no moms. This should have been a red flag for any sane Christian, that they were being diverted into worshiping someone but God the Father. And I have people complaining at me to this very day. They're getting mad that I'm saying pray to God the Father only. How could you get mad at that? So Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. Now we know that Jesus is speaking in parables. When he says, I am the truth, he says that his name is synonymous with God's truth. That is the key to the parables that Jesus gives us. When he says, I am, it means the truth. When the apostles say Jesus, they mean God's truth. Unless there was a bunch of censoring and editing as far as the apostles go. But we have, straight from our honored teacher, Jesus Christ, that he is saying, my name is synonymous with God's truth. Now here is the key to that parable in practice when we go to Matthew 10:34 through 38. And a lot of modern Christians and Catholics, they trip over themselves trying to describe what Jesus is saying here because they don't understand what the parable is, the key to the parable. Jesus Christ's name is synonymous with God's truth. That is the key to the parable. So when an exoteric believer reads Matthew 10:34 through 38, they don't get it. And I've seen ridiculous mental gymnastics from supposed scholars of Christianity trying to make heads or tails of this. And because they're exoteric believers, they don't even hit the mark. So let's read Matthew 10:34 through 38. It says, Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. Jesus is saying this, right? Think not that I have come to send peace on earth. I come not to send peace, but a sword. For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's foes shall be they of his own household. He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. See, this confuses people because they think that Jesus is being a warmonger here. No, that is not even close to hitting the mark. I know what all of you have been taught. Leave your programming at the door. We know the parable key. The key to all of Jesus' parables is Jesus is synonymous with God's truth. That's the interchangeable word. So let's read Matthew 10:34 through 38 with God's truth in its place. And you can start seeing the ancient Christian teachings here. Think not that God's truth comes to send peace on earth. God's truth does not send peace, but a sword. Now in the ancient day, the sword is knowledge, is intellect, is truth. The sword is uncomfortable. It cuts through lies. It cuts through fantasy. That's why Jesus is saying this. For God's truth is come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. All of that is saying that God's truth isn't dependent on approval from others around you. That's not what it's dependent on. God's truth just is. It's what has happened and what is happening now. A man's foes shall be they of his own household, meaning that when God's truth is followed, agape love, then it will inevitably set you against members of your own family, because there's a bunch of people out there who are acting like dumb animals, and they are accepting fantasy, and they are lying to themselves. Those are the people, when you come to know God's truth and live it, no matter how comfortable it is, no matter how much approval you get, you will be set at variance with members of your own household when you do so. And it says, he that loveth father or mother more than the truth, God's truth, is not worthy of God's truth. And he that loveth son or daughter more than God's truth is not worthy of God's truth. Get it? Now it's starting to make sense, isn't it? Once we have the key to the parables. And he that taketh not his stauros is actually what it says here, not cross. The stauros in Greek is shaped like a capital T. So for all those people who think that Jesus Christ was dragging a huge cross on his shoulder through the streets, no, that's not how it worked. They would put the horizontal bar up against the back of their neck and strap their arms to it, and they'd be run through the streets just with that piece of wood, that bar, while people like spit at them and throw stuff at them, all the way up to the crucifixion site, where they would lift that bar onto the vertical bar, wood, that was already driven into the ground. They lifted up to the top of that, forming a capital T. That's a stauros, and that's what Matthew 10:38 actually says. It does not say cross, it says stauros. But all of that is just extra information for you Christian warriors that moonlight as Christian scholars. I know you'd probably appreciate that. But it says that he that taketh not his stauros and followeth after God's truth is not worthy of God's truth. And that means that no matter what kind of shackles and problems you get, disapproval from institutions of false authority, even punishment from institutions of false authority, no matter what, you keep following God's truth, not speaking his truth or all this other stuff, just following it, doing moral action, careful action. All of that stuff is knowing God's truth, knowing his law, and doing his will, no matter what. So that is what Matthew 10:34 through 38 actually means, using the key that Jesus gave us in John 14:6. going by our honored teacher's own words, saying that he is speaking to us in parables. Now we know what God's truth is, and it has nothing to do with belief or perception or any silly nonsense. It's objective. We can all agree on it. Yes, sometimes personal things happen in your life that you're not going to be able to prove to others, but that can still be God's truth. You just got to keep it to yourself. For instance, I can tell people all day and all night that I have been out of body. God's Holy Spirit, guardian angel, separate from this physical body. I can tell people this, but I cannot prove it to them. There's no way to measure it scientifically. So I just got to keep it to myself, and it could go into people's consideration files in their head. So we know what God's truth is. Now God's law is what governs all the things that happen in God's beautiful reality. That's God's law governing the consequences for what happens. It's basically cause and effect. None of this has to do with people deciding what his law is or what moral or immoral behavior is. No, it's objective. We can all agree on it. It does not have to do with perspective. Perception is not truth. So God's law is what gives us the consequences for our behavior. And for a detailed description of what God's laws actually are, you could always buy my book if you want to help my family, or I read you my book for free. Go to the chapter that is God's Law and the Old Covenant, and I explain all of his laws in high detail. But I can't really get into that here because we'd be spending a lot of time every week doing this. We already do spend a bunch of time going over stuff that some people might get, but it's entirely necessary, Christian warrior, and that's what these sermons are all about, is learning God's truth and God's law, coming to know it, feeling good about yourself for knowing it, being confident in your actions, knowing that they are moral, not guessing, not going after what's been codified in this book or that. No, just knowing it. So God's law, God's will, has been done already in this universe. God's law is God's will, and it's already been done. It's mechanical. It gives consequences to our actions. Yes, God's law is mechanical, but God's care for us and love for us, God the Father, he has a vested interest in us. That is not mechanical. He really cares for you. He loves you. He wants you to understand his truth and his law, and he wants you to behave morally so you can stop getting negative consequences. If you got your hand in a fire and it's just burning your fleshy fingers off, you're just sitting there screaming and praying to God, God, please stop the burning. God is just looking at you going, when are you going to behave morally and start recognizing my law? In this case, my law is the fire. It's hot and it's burning you. There may be some creative consequences that can be bent in our favor, but no amount of praying is going to get you out of consequences that you're going to get from your careless, stupid, or immoral behavior. You're going to get those consequences. No praying about it. And no one else is going to take the rap for your consequences. There is no one 2,000 years ago who is going to die for your sins so you could just get away scot-free. No, you are going to face the consequences for your careless behavior and your immoral behavior. No one else takes the rap for that. I know what you've been taught, leave your programming at the door. Really, there's only one of these statements that makes sense. That God's law is a mechanical force that gives consequences to our careless or immoral behavior, and even moral behavior gives positive consequences for that. That makes sense. The other magical mechanic of someone dying for your sins, all of that comes from a Sol Invictus myth taken literally, allegory taken literally. Not my opinion. That is not part of ancient Christianity. Those are not inner teachings that people are just blindly, emotionally trapped, conditioned, fearfully believing. Christianity existed at least as far back as 800 BC. We know it for a fact. BC means before Christ. That means Christianity existed before our honored teacher was even said to have lived. Before there was even a Bible written in 325 AD and packaged for us to consume that was safe, state approved, so the parasite class wouldn't get any grief from us. There were even Christians before the Pentateuch, the 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Before even those were written down, there were Christians. By the way, those were finally written down around 500 BC. That's when the Pentateuch, the Old Testament, the Torah, was actually finally written down. So God's law is static, mechanical, can't wiggle your way out of it. You can insulate yourself from it. You can try to. That's what Satanists do. They try and insulate themselves from the consequences of God's law. Mostly they do this by putting out influence. Satanists will put out influence and get other people who are dumb to follow their orders and take on the moral consequence themselves. That's how Satanists try to insulate themselves from God's law. But there's no way to fully insulate yourself from God's law. And all of them know this. Even the cult-affiliated Satanists who have this knowledge, they know it too. Also, God's truth is an unstoppable force. They can try and hide the truth for as long as they can, but God's truth is like a tidal wave. It's going to crash through every dam you put in front of it. It just takes time, unfortunately. But, God's got plenty of time, got plenty of patience. We either start coming to know His truth and His law and acting morally, or we keep getting negative consequences forever and ever. So fire is hot. It's part of God's law. It's mechanical. God isn't mad at you. You don't beg forgiveness from God the Father. God isn't mad at you. His law is just giving out consequences. If you stick your fleshy fingers in a fire, you're going to get burned. No praying about it. And God isn't mad at you for fire being hot. It's ridiculous what's been taught. God's truth and God's law are so much simpler, and they make a lot more sense. And all of these come from ancient Christianity. God is waiting for us to understand. He is waiting for us to behave morally. Right now, the only moral action that could get us out of this problem, this hell world, is self-defensive force, Christian warriors. I don't know how many times I gotta say it. So what is morality? Morality is action. That's how we know it's not just a figment in someone's mind. No one decides right from wrong. There is a static right from wrong. Moral action is care. It's behaving with care, behaving with nonviolence, and behaving in self-defensive force, should we need to. And of course, Christian warriors, in this moment, in our unfortunate hell world existence, in the physical reality on this beautiful planet that God created, we have Satanists just running the house, and the moral action that has to be taken is self-defensive force. That's what has to happen. No one's going to pull your butt out of the fire. We have to do it. That's our responsibility. Morality is care. Behave with nonviolence, behave with self-defense. That's moral action. Action. Care is not something that happens in thought or emotion. Those two expressions lead up to action. Then it becomes moral or immoral once you take action. We have to care. We have to behave nonviolently, and we have to behave in self-defensive force. All immoral action is violating God-given rights. That's immoral action. We are born with God-given rights, property rights. We were born in these bodies. It's ours. We own it. It's very simple. This is not up to people deciding what right and wrong are. We are born inside these bodies. We own them. No one else does. You do. That's it. No government owns it. No religion owns it. You own it. Those are your God-given rights, property rights. So when we care, we stop Satan, the force, the adversarial force, in its aspects of decay and destruction, because we are careful. We take care of our physical stuff, like our bodies, the stuff that we morally own, the enterprise that we morally conduct. We care to beat back Satan in its aspects of decay and destruction. That's what care does, moral action. Not selfish care like you've heard being taught, Satanist conditioning out there in hell world saying, oh, only care for yourself and your immediate family and friends, caring for me and my own. No, that's selfish care. That's Satanism, actually. That's part of their religion. Don't be like that. They are influencing everybody to take up aspects of their religion. Selfish care is one of them. Not caring about the condition out there. Oh, I only care about myself and my family and that's it. That's selfish. That ain't care. That's limited hangout care. That's not what I'm talking about when I say behave with care. Behaving with care means to behave with agape love. Care about the condition out there. Care about everybody. If anyone is in slavery, that's one person too many. And folks, if we are all under the yoke of this fractional reserve system, then we are all being enslaved. So care about it. Care also is what stops Satanists from taking over the world. Recently, it's been popularized, the ritual at Bohemian Grove, that all the Satanists and their dumb little minions go and they do this ritual every year. That ritual is called the cremation of care, that is burning away care. And the ritual isn't magical or anything like that. Ritual is just for beginners to solidify their will so they can all get on the same page and bring their will into reality through action. That's what ritual is all for. It's just for beginners to focus their will. That is what the cremation of care ritual at Bohemian Grove is for. All the Satanists get together and they are burning away care. Even the effigy that they burn, which is like this human-looking thing, before their satanic ancient god Molech, which could be an owl or a bull. At the Bohemian Grove site, it's actually a big rock that looks like a horned owl. But they are burning this effigy of a man, which they call dull care. They think, in their silly notions, because a lot of these people are exoteric believers as well, they think that through this ritual they can get people to not care about what they're doing and not care that they're taking over the planet. The ritual itself is not working, it's just that their influence on top of the fact, that turns people's brains all around to where they don't even know up from down anymore. That's all influence-based. The ritual had no magical effect, it just focuses all of those Satanists' will to keep doing what they're doing, putting out their influence, making sure to twist and invert all of God's creation. So of course, they're burning care. Cremation of care is the ritual at Bohemian Grove. They are trying to destroy care. No, it's not a magical thing. All it is focusing all those Satanists' will to carry on with their plan, their influence, heading for those command positions of institutional false authority. They'll just carry on and focus their will, stay on the same page through centuries, generational, and enslave everybody else who is not a Satanist. They're even enslaved by themselves in little hierarchies all the way up the chain. Even weird non-physical entities. But you know who's at the top of the pyramid, Christian warriors? Satan, the adversarial force. Fear controls them all. Fear, decay, destruction. So that is why they do that Bohemian Grove ritual. The cremation of care. They are burning care. They're trying to make sure that everyone out there doesn't act in self-defensive force. The ritual itself is not working on the people, their influence is. There's nothing magical about it. They are just focusing their will and bringing their will, using what they know about God's reality, into physical conditions for us. And no one's doing anything about it. That's why we have to behave morally. We have to care. Also, behaving morally is behaving non-violently. Violence has taken on a new meaning through popular usage when before it originally meant a violation of God-given rights. Something that you're doing against an innocent party. Do not start or initiate physical harm on an innocent party. No, it does not mean hurting someone's feelings. That's just influence. They have a decision to be offended or not, just like you do. Physical harm is what violence is, not hurting people's feelings. More Satanist conditioning out there is telling people that violence is not only any act of force that destroys something, but it's also hurting someone's feelings. No, neither of those things are violence. Violence is the violation of God-given rights. That is initiating, starting harm on an innocent party. That's behaving non-violently. Notice how I do not say behave with non-aggression, because aggression itself is a tool that God gives us to say no. Aggression and anger both are not evil, are not bad, like they've been teaching in these nonsense New Agey religions. Aggression has its place. Anger has its place. They are tools to be used. No, we do not let the tool use us. We use the tool. It is for us to use to say no to Satanist conditioning and say no to Satanist enslavement. Now, the most important one is self-defensive force, an act of agape love. That is absolutely required, Christian warriors. Self-defensive force is required. You cannot pray your way out of this, and there is no escaping into heaven. Yes, we all go to heaven to pick new parents, but we're coming right back here, getting our skin in the game, because that's God's system of spiritual progression. The Satanists know it. There's even huge statues. The Court of the Pina at the Vatican. They know God's system of spiritual progression, and they keep it from you, because they want you to believe that it's all done in one, and you just keep your head down, you pray in a corner, and you just get to escape into heaven while they turn this place into a hell world. And I've heard modern Christians and Catholics say this to me, that Satan owns this planet. No. We do not just give this planet over to Satan. It's ridiculous. Not even a Christian thing to say. We are so many centuries into people violating our God-given rights. The parasite class out there, Satanists, their cabal of minions, they have been consistently violating our God-given rights with zero pushback from us. Zero! Because everyone's waiting for saviors and thinking someone else will do the work for them. No. The responsibility is ours. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We are to do God's will here. His will has already been done. It is the immutable law out there giving consequences. He's waiting for us to understand. One of the passages that was missed in the Bible, describing self-defensive force and your right to it, not the right of cops, not the right of military, your right, your personal right. See, one thing that people don't get is that even in our constitutional republic, and believe me, I'd love for everyone to live in an anarchonic society, but we're nowhere near that spiritually. We're generations short and millions of teachers shy of actually having an anarchonic society, so I have a grudging acceptance of the necessity of a constitutional republic. And in that constitutional republic, what our founders actually put down for us, advice for us to follow, is that when we're born on this soil, we were born into a coast-to-coast militia. No flags necessary, no affiliation necessary, and no well-regulated does not mean regulated by the government. No, it does not mean the National Guard. It means that everyone is a good cop. Every single person over the age of 15, especially women, are trained in the use of the weapons of the day, the modern weapons of the day, in our case, firearms. So it's in there, and we should all be understanding that we have an individual, all of us have the right to self-defensive force should anyone dare to violate our God-given rights. Even in Luke 22:36 it says, Jesus says, Then said he unto them, But now he that hath a purse, let him take it, and likewise his scrip. And he that hath no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. Direct from our honored teacher, Jesus Christ, saying that if you do not have a modern weapon of the day, back then it was a sword, then you better sell the clothes off your back and buy one. One big militia, one coast-to-coast group, one big family, all good cops. No one abdicating their right to self-defensive force to any other institution, any other people. No, cops aren't the only people allowed to do it. No, military aren't the only people allowed to do it, because guess what? All those command positions of institutional authority are being commanded by Satanists at the moment. So they're telling them what to do, and everyone following immoral orders is being a little order-following baby Satanist rat. Whether they think so or not, whether they know it or not, that's what they're doing. If you're following immoral orders, you are getting the consequences from God's law, not the person who told you to do it. Now, when I say that you either know things or you don't know things, it all comes down to staying away from belief. Belief is nonsense. You don't just believe things, you know things. That's what ancient Christians taught. They were often called knowers. So the ancient Christians taught it in a different way.
They would teach the trivium to their young, which is knowledge, understanding, wisdom. Wisdom being equal to action. So you take in the knowledge, no matter where it's coming from, all of it. You sift through it. You do not fear knowledge. There's certain people out there that think they'll get possessed or something from picking up a satanic Bible and reading through it. You have to know your enemy to fight them. God wants you to actually take in all of God's truth, all the knowledge that you can. Then you sift through it. You weed out the inconsistencies. You get proof, physical proof, that's cross-referenced, to verify the claims in that body of knowledge. That's the understanding part. And once you've come to an understanding, you can act on that information. That is the wisdom part, taking action. So ancient Christians would teach the trivium to their young. Knowledge, understanding, wisdom. To put it in a simpler, more modern way, it's input, processing, output. And to give you an idea of how to organize your thoughts like the ancients taught, imagine in your head you got two computer files. One is marked consideration. You consider this stuff. And the other file is marked knowledge. You know this stuff. You either know stuff or you don't know stuff. There is no file marked belief. So when you have a claim, information, it gets thrown in your consideration file. And if you don't have the proof to back up these claims, physical proof that are cross-referenceable, then that doesn't leave your consideration file. You can just strongly consider it if you want, but you don't know it. That's the big difference. Now, as we go through the Bible, I give you a lot of stuff for your consideration file for you to go out and verify a lot of this stuff on your own. I can't know everything. I'm just one man. And then you can find the proof to then start moving some of this stuff from your consideration file into your knowledge file. There's certain things that I know about God's reality that people would just laugh at, not because they have proof otherwise, no. It's because they worship false institutions of authority and they've been conditioned a certain way to think a certain way and believe things in a certain way. Not because they have any type of knowledge that I do not. When I say that I know something, it's because they're just emotionally conditioned. That's how the ancient Christians would teach newcomers how to organize their thoughts. You either know stuff or you don't. Christian warriors, there's a consideration file in your head and a knowledge file in your head. Everything goes to the consideration file first until you can prove it and move stuff over into your knowledge file. You either know stuff or you don't know stuff. There is no belief. And being a Christian, what accepting Christ means to the ancient Christians, what it means is that you accept God's truth, God's law, and you do His will. That's what accepting Christ means. 777. Putting down 666. The beast consciousness. That's acting like an animal, thinking like an animal, feeling like an animal, behaving like an animal. 666. And instead we accept Christ, 777. That is thinking, feeling, and behaving morally, knowing God's truth, not believing it, knowing God's law, not believing it, and behaving morally. That's accepting Christ. And there is no need for a holy act. There's no need to change your whole personality to become a Christian. No. You can listen to Iron Maiden, gangster rap, whatever. All that Satanist conditioning, once you know how to spot it, does not affect you anymore. You don't need to just start listening to Christian rock all the time if you're going to become a Christian. No, you don't need to do that. You need to first come to understand what Satanist conditioning is so you can spot it, and then that stuff doesn't influence you anymore. You're completely protected by knowing God's truth and knowing God's law. That's where protection comes from. And, of course, behaving morally. Sometimes we got to look out for the infirm or little kids. They really need our help, our protection. And speaking of kids, Christian warriors, teach your kids how to spot Satanist conditioning. Be involved with their whole life up until you're done being a steward to them, which is legally around 18, but that number isn't just for fun. It's actually when people can start behaving like adults in society, around 18 years old. Not because it was codified in some book, but because that's when you're a young adult. So all the way up until that point, you are a steward of them, and you have to pay attention. No excuses. oh, I gotta work and I gotta do this and I gotta do that. I can't pay attention to what they're learning in school. Those are all excuses and they're not valid. Look at what's happening out there in Hell World right now. They're actually trying to tell people in our beautiful country that the parents don't have any right to decide what they're being taught in school. It's absolutely absurd. And that's what you get for being lazy and not being involved in the raising of your kids. Christian Warriors, raising your kids does not mean covering their expenses. That's not raising kids. Raising kids means teaching them what I'm teaching you. Coming to know God's truth and God's law. Understanding what Satanist conditioning is. Understanding that false authority means nothing, and at best it's redundant. The only authority in God's reality is God. God the Father. His law. His immutable law is already out there, giving consequences. The best that government law can do is be redundant and back up God's actual law. That's the best that government law can do. Fake human law. Mostly it just goes the opposite direction. Keeps tightening the screws of control. Leveraging people through fear. Now remember, Satan is fear. Morality is so simple, Christian Warriors. All it is behaving with care, behaving with nonviolence, and behaving with self-defensive force. All of that is very simple. We are in control of that condition out there. God's law gives us consequences for behaving through fear or through love. When we behave through love, we get order and we get freedom. When we behave through fear, we get slavery and we get chaos. See, Christian Warriors, ancient Christianity made sense. All of this is just objective knowledge. None of it has to do with belief or taking allegory literally. Notice how all of this sounds a lot different than what's been taught the last 1,600 years. It's really too bad. That's why I'm bringing it back, Christian Warriors, so you can start teaching this stuff to your kids. None of what I'm saying is wrong or untrue or even dangerous or anything like that. It's teaching you the basics. You're not taught to believe a bunch of silly stuff. You're not taught to take allegory literally out of some book that's been censored and edited. Our Adam human species is going through a learning process right now, and the Satanists are having a little bit of trouble keeping control, as you can see from these panic moves for the last couple of years. Now, are we going to let them win and tighten the screws, or are we going to usher in God's truth and God's law? Or are we going to start behaving morally? Which one? We decide. No saviors. The only savior is moral behavior. All right, Christian Warriors, are you ready for another beautiful Sunday and another great, effective week ahead? Progressing spiritually, all of you. Are you ready for it? Because I am. Are you ready to look into that mirror and come to terms with what you really are, who you really are, what your responsibilities are? Spiritual first, all else second. Unwinding all that trauma, rejecting any fantasy versions of yourself that you've believed that you know are not true, looking into that mirror and understanding that work must be done. Internal work must be done. You do have a responsibility, a spiritual responsibility. Your spiritual progression is your responsibility. No one's going to save you. No one's going to pull your hand out of the fire. You have to do it. You have to look into that mirror and ask yourself, am I initiating physical harm on innocent parties through my actions? Am I still confused because I am rejecting available information, that is, ignoring it, behaving with ignorance? Am I trying to escape instead of facing the problems out there, the problems inside? Am I putting in a day's work and then 100% of the rest of my time being spent just entertaining myself as much as possible, not caring to know, not caring to understand, not caring about your own spiritual progression? That's behaving with apathy. Am I whining about the world outside and praying for somebody else to fix it so I can do nothing? Am I allowing people to use me as a doormat and not standing up to bullies, not fighting back? That is behaving with cowardice. You have to face all of these things inside yourself. Everyone misrepresents Sir Francis Bacon, or as the world knows it, William Shakespeare's line where he says, "To thine own self be true." And I know what people think that means. Just follow your heart, no matter what. No, that's not what that means. It means stop lying to yourself.
Be truthful with yourself. Look into that mirror and figure out where the internal work must be done, where the external work must be done, and do it. Drop all the fantasy versions that you believe about yourself and actually build yourself up spiritually into what you have the potential to be. One of God's children. Endless potential. You just got to build those skills and do the work. So are you ready to look into that mirror and stop lying to yourself? Are you ready to look out that window and see a beautiful paradise planet with so much love from our Father to experience? Agape, most important, Philos, Eros, all together. Understanding that it is a paradise planet out there and that we are stewards of it. However, we're allowing about 15% Satanist psychopaths to sprint to the command positions of institutional authority and just turn that paradise planet into a hell world. Are you ready to look out the window and understand the condition that we're in? Are you ready to drop all the fantasy versions of what is being sold to you through Satanist-controlled media, that world is some other way than it actually is? Are you ready to do these things, Christian warriors? Because that's what's going to make a beautiful Sunday ahead, and that's what's going to make a beautiful and effective week ahead for us. As God's children, all of us born with the same exact God-given rights, no more, no less. And all of us with the same amount of potential, although we have different skill sets that we are better at, each of us individually, we all have the potential to be the best emissary for our Father, the best Christian warrior that we can be. So let's get all the fantasy out of the way, let's get all the lies out of the way, and come to our Father asking this one question: how can I be a better emissary for you? And when you get the answer, you better be listening. And no, your guardian angel, and by extension God the Father, is not going to tell you to go violate someone's God-given rights. That is physically initiating harm on another person. He's not going to tell you to do that. So if you're ready to do that, Christian warriors, drop all the fantasy, drop all the lies, and actually do some work, then let's get this sermon underway. I sure hope you didn't skip through the basics of ancient Christianity, because those teachings do not change. God's law and God's truth does not change. And since you know it's a pre-recorded sermon up in the front there, I'll say it again. Good morning, Christian warriors. I'm so glad to have you here with me today, ready to strengthen and revitalize that existing connection to your Father. That's right, we are not reconnecting with our Father. We are revitalizing an existing connection with our Father. A connection to our Father that cannot be broken, stolen, or sold. Can't be broken by any entity, cannot be stolen by any entity, and it can't be sold by you. Get that nonsense fan fiction out of your heads. If you go to the website PastorCliftonMinistry.com, there's a link to Odyssey, which is just another platform, another video platform. But this platform lets you download content. In my case, I give away content for free because I don't do this for money or friends. Obviously, I do not do that. I'm doing it as a matter of testimony. God the Father told me to do it. I know it's a hard sell, but I guess that goes to your consideration file. So if you go to Odyssey, you can download these sermons in video or audio format for free. Just click on the three little dots in the bottom right-hand corner, and you'll get some download options from Odyssey that does not require any sign-in or money or any such thing. Completely free. I even read my book to you for free. So I sure hope you know those basics of ancient Christianity before you skip ahead. If you don't know them inside out, then you're not going to understand a lot of what I'm talking about through these sermons. Ancient Christians taught God's truth and God's law. And his law was set into motion the second that his beautiful reality was created. He set those laws into motion to govern all behavior. Even the action of inanimate objects. All of it is governed by his law. And his truth and his law came before any sacred book in any religion. Ancient Christianity came well before Catholicism, and it even came before the Torah of Judaism was even written down around 500 BC. We have proof that ancient Christians existed as far back as 800 BC. Not my opinion. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, go back to the basics. The reason why the parasite class grabbed Christianity and twisted it all up through Roman Catholicism, the Church of England, and now all 400 plus denominations of Christianity is because it was inconvenient for them. The parasite class did not like ancient Christianity. That's why they warped it all up. Taught a bunch of fantasy, started pushing fear as if God the Father is going to make us fear him and all this silly nonsense. They took ancient Christianity and warped it all into this twisted version of dark Mithraism because ancient Christians taught responsibility. They taught how to take moral action, and they taught how to get close to your Father. They taught how to recognize his law, understand it, and then behave morally within the parameters of it. And you can experiment with God's immutable law if you're daring enough or stupid enough, but I don't recommend it. Just stand on the shoulders of giants, as they say. Take in the knowledge, understand it, and learn how to behave morally and carefully. That way you'll get less negative consequences out there from that unfortunate hell world that all these Satanists have built around us. It is built because no one's done anything about it, especially in the last 1,600 years. Be honest with yourself. What ancient Christians taught is that there's a system of creation in God's beautiful reality and a system of spiritual progression. If you don't understand those things, go back to the basics. What it all boils down to is that we are in control. We have God's Holy Spirit, our guardian angels, the real us, inside our physical bodies, going through these expressions. You have to drop ego. Ego is only a tool that teaches individuality. The problem is not that we have an ego. The problem is that the ego has most people. They've let the tool run the house. They've let the tool control them. And that is Satanism. Satanism puts ego on a pedestal, and hedonism is the only pursuit. That's how you know what a Satanist is. And people may not even know that they are behaving like Satanists when they actually are behaving like Satanists every minute of the day. If your ego is up front, if you're chasing around hedonism, if you think money is God, then you're behaving like a Satanist, whether you know it or not. So we get ego out of the way. That's a little crybaby noise in the head saying, I'm not wrong, I'm not wrong. Look, you're going to have to be wrong once in a while to learn new things. It takes a real man or a real woman to admit that they're wrong and move forward with their spiritual progression, or just any progression. The fact is that we are in control. If we behave like warriors and we all behave morally and carefully, we get a condition of freedom and love out there in reality, in God's beautiful reality. That's how the law gives us consequences that are favorable to us when we behave morally and carefully. But if we all behave like cowardly little crybabies, if we behave like apathetic, ignorant slaves, then we get a condition of slavery and fear out there, and that's what we got. It's really that simple. That's how God's law operates, not my opinion. We have to do his will. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. We behave morally or we get consequences. That's the cut and dry ancient Christian teaching right there. Because if you don't behave carefully and you don't behave morally, if you don't accept Christ as the ancient Christians taught it, that is, being the master of your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. That is, behaving with care, real care, not the fake stuff of, I only care about me and my own, that dumb little slogan that's propagated through Satanist-controlled media. No, real care is, if one is suffering, that's one person too many. If one is enslaved, that is one person too many. That's care. We all behave with care. We all behave with nonviolence. That's not initiating physical harm on an innocent party. No, words are not violence. Words are influence only. If it ain't a physical action, then you can't conduct violence if it ain't a physical action. Period. The end. Not my opinion. That's how we know morality is objective, because it has to do with action. And the last facet of behaving morally is behaving with self-defensive force should anyone be violating your God-given rights or the God-given rights of the infirm, or most importantly, our children. Know the difference between influence and action. If you don't know that difference between those two things, I don't know how I can help you. Influence is anything that is not action. Very simple. So words, all that's influence. Threats, promises, lies, paychecks, coercion, all that's influence. We have to take action that is moral, and we get a change in the condition out there. It improves. If you're complaining about having a rough time in hell world, then we're going to have to do something about it. Morality is rooted in action. Yes, thoughts can be good or evil. Yes, emotions can be good or evil. Yes, actions can be good or evil, but only action can be moral or immoral. We have to understand these concepts. If we don't behave morally, we get consequences from Satan. That is a force, not one entity, not some silly anthropomorphized character that's been pushed for the last 1,600 years. No, that's ridiculous. There is nothing outside of our Father's control. God the Father put Satan out there on purpose. It is the force of fear as it relates to the consciousness. It is the force of decay and destruction as it relates to everything else. So we behave with care to get Satan subdued in its aspects of decay and destruction, and we use courage to subdue Satan in its aspect of fear. That's how we battle, at least against the force of Satan. But our real battle, Christian warriors, is against Satanists. And no one's going to fix any problems for you. I see this all the time. Ancient Christianity did not teach belief or faith. They taught that you either know stuff or you don't know stuff. Imagine if you had two computer files in your head, one labeled consideration, one labeled knowledge. If you get a claim, you need to furnish it with physical, measurable evidence, unless, of course, it's dealing with your own spiritual progression. You're not going to be able to prove those advances to others. So let's hope your perception is in line with what God's truth actually is, so you can start moving things from your consideration file into your knowledge file. But everything else must have evidence to be moved into your knowledge file from your consideration file in your head. There ain't no file in your head labeled belief or faith. Ancient Christians did not teach that nonsense. That's belief and fantasy, when you just take things that are not proven and try and move them into your knowledge file, saying that you know these things. For example, all these people out there saying they have insiders and all this nonsense, that ain't proof of a claim. That doesn't go to your knowledge file. You know, it's all the people pushing fantasy that get the majority of that hell world money out there from a bunch of useful dupes. And the people telling the truth, they don't get rewarded in hell world. They don't get rewarded until that hell world is dismantled and it becomes the paradise planet that our Father intended for it to be. That's when the people telling God's actual truth and teaching His law, that's when we will be rewarded, when that world changes out there. Until then, everyone's looking for escapism. They're all looking for beautiful sounding lies. They're all looking for someone else to fix the problems for them. They're all looking for a savior. They're all waiting for God the Father to come back and clean their apartment for them. And that ain't gonna happen, because we are God's children. We must do His will. If you're unable to do the most effective thing, that is fighting back with self-defensive force against Satanists, if you're unable to do that, do the bare minimum. Teach your kids properly. Teach others. Know your stuff before you speak it. Teach others, whoever you can reach. And live within your means. Don't go down their silly game of taking out line after line of credit. Most of all, people just have to drop fantasy. They are believing so much nonsense, it's ridiculous. And that's why the hell world persists. If praying in a corner did anything, that world out there would be a lot different now, because that's all people have been doing for the last 1,600 years. Prayer is powerful, yes, but it has to be coupled with action. I explained this in past sermons. We have to understand God's beautiful reality. We have to understand our responsibility as His children, all born with the exact same God-given rights, all with immense potential, all with inherent value. We have to understand that one of our greatest gifts from our Father, being one of His children, the whole point all of this exists, is that we have free will here. That's why the law is governing all behavior, because we have free will. Because we have free will, there is no such thing as predeterminism or fate or prophecy or any such thing about people telling the future or anything like this. No, there is no prophecy, there is no fate, there is no predeterminism. Ancient Christians did not teach fantasy. That's why you'll never hear me teaching it. Fate and predeterminism and prophecy can't exist with free will in God's beautiful reality. Because we have free will, the other things don't exist. They can't be together existing at the same time in God's beautiful reality. It's one or the other. We know we have free will. That means that fate, predeterminism, destiny, prophecy, none of that stuff exists. That is fantasy that people are believing, and they want to believe that because it relieves them of any responsibility. And notice the hell world getting worse and worse. And it's not all doom and gloom, of course. Christian warriors, there is a lot of love and beauty to experience out there in God's beautiful reality, full of His love. However, if we do nothing, Satanists will continue advancing toward their goal of a gigantic prison garbage heap planet where they are the cockroach kings of it. And once you see that this plan is advancing every single day, you'll be like me. And you'll say, no, we have to teach, we have to do something. Otherwise, Satanists will work together and get their dark will done on this planet until we stand up and say no. Fighting influence with influence, fighting action with action. No, you don't fight influence with action. You have to know the difference between the two. Influence versus influence, action versus action. That is lies, promises, paychecks, threats, coercion. That is countered with our influence. Saying no, asking why, demanding proof, getting it. That's all influence. That's the battle of the realm of influence. The battle for the realm of action has to do with a Satanist out there, more often than not, giving influence orders out and a bunch of immoral rat enforcers doing the bidding of Satanists and saying, oh, I just want to feed my family. I just got to keep my job, keep my paycheck. I'm just following orders. That's who's doing the bidding of all Satanists out there. Be honest with yourself. If they said, we got to confiscate all the guns in the United States of America, is it the governor or the president going around collecting guns? No, it's the enforcers. The ones who would dare violate our God-given rights. That's who's doing it. Be honest with yourself. The last 3 years of that fake pandemic should have been a huge wake-up call for people to stop worshiping false authority. There's only one authority in this reality, and it's God the Father's law. His immutable law. Imagine some guy has an apartment and he's just trashing the place, letting heaps of garbage pile up in every corner, cockroaches running everywhere, and his friend comes over and says, when are you going to take responsibility and clean up your apartment? And that guy says, oh no, the Bible says that all apartment cleaning is mine, so saith the Lord, so I'm not going to do anything. Sound familiar? For those with trouble honing their relational thinking, the apartment is your mind, your body, the world around you. It's an analogy. So his friend asks him, are you going to take responsibility and clean your apartment? And he says, no, Jesus Christ is coming back and he's going to destroy my current apartment and build me a new one where I can set to wrecking it just like I did this one because I have learned nothing. Or even worse, saying, nope, Satan owns my apartment. Sound familiar? That's how Catholicism and modern Christianity have been taught for the last 1,600 years. That's why I'm bringing the old stuff back, Christian warriors. This ain't my new take on Christianity. This is the old stuff, provably not my opinion. Go back to the basics if you're having trouble grasping this. If you would rather accept fantasy and be a little crybaby, praying in the corner doing nothing, hoping that someone else cleans your apartment for you, not understanding that prayer has to be coupled with action to change things, if you are doing this and you want more fantasy to gobble up, being a little child, then there are millions of other priests and pastors that you can listen to. Go listen to them. I'm not doing this for money or friends. The most popular of these people, priests and pastors, are the ones selling fantasy. Those are the ones that are rewarded richly in Hell World. Well, I ain't doing that. I ain't selling fantasy. Just as an aside, go out there and ask on the internet, because they're too cowardly to show themselves in real life, go ask the people who think the earth is flat, ask if they're Christian or not. I bet you'll get 100% correlation between modern Christians and Catholics also being flat earthers, and there's a reason for that. It's because people are accepting fantasy and they love it. They love gobbling it up. They don't want to hear truth. They don't want to hear responsibility. They don't want to understand how God's immutable law works. When they hear you have to do something about it, they run in the opposite direction. I notice dips in my viewership, not like I'm trying to do this for any type of fame or fortune or any silly thing like that. Obviously I'm not. But I notice that the more I push responsibility, taking responsibility and taking action, the more that number goes down because people don't want to hear it. They want to hear someone talking softly to them, like all those pastors who are saying, you just keep your head down, pray in a corner, and you're doing the right thing. God's going to help you be the best slave you can be. You just keep showing faith and believe in fantasy and all that stuff, and man, your ship's going to come in, you're going to get a ton of hell world money. And don't worry, you're not doing anything wrong. You're just out of control emotionally, you're out of control of your thoughts. You're not taking any defensive action against Satanists, and it's not your fault. All you gotta do is keep praying, and pretty soon God's gonna fix everything. The people saying that are the people with the big old mansions. I don't even want a mansion, Christian warriors. I wouldn't even use those resources for that. If I even got those types of resources, I would use all of that to put my thumbs into the eyes of every Satanist out there through my actions. Everyone out there is looking for an identity for themselves. That's why you have a ton of Americans claiming that they're Irish, even though they've never been there. They're talking about great-great-grandparents at this point. They're always clamoring for some external source of their identity. Your identity is spiritual, Christian warriors. Stop looking around in the physical for your identity, your vocation. That means your job is not your identity. Your identity is spiritual. You're one of God's children. Go inward to find your identity. If you just adhere to accepting Christ as the ancient Christians taught it, you can't go wrong. Of course, in a hell world, it may be uncomfortable and you may lose friends, but that's what having principles is all about. Your principles don't change because your comfort level changes. Your principles don't change because you don't have peer approval. Approval and comfort are not determining factors in your spiritual progression. In fact, you go the opposite direction if you find those two things to be the most important. Comfort and approval. Your spiritual progression is dead in the water if you think comfort and approval and some promise of safety that Satanists are selling us every day, saying, oh, look, if you just give up your freedom, we'll protect you like mommy and daddy. Daddy's the Republican representative form of this false dialectic. Mommy's the liberal Democrat representatives of this false dialectic. Just sell us your safety and we'll make sure you're the most comfortable slave and you'll have all the approval of all the slaves around you. That's what they promise everybody. And once you take that bait, then your spiritual progression is dead in the water. That's essentially saying, yeah, I'm just a dumb animal. I'm gonna wallow in 666 beast consciousness and never accept Christ. I'll never be the master of my thoughts because I don't know anything. I'll never be the master of my emotions because I keep trying to tackle depression and anxiety with a bunch of drugs and escapism. I'll never be the master of my actions because someone else controls my actions. I do exactly as I'm told as a little slave. Satanists will always sell safety for your freedom. That's the price, the freedom that we have as God's children. And this is the absurd part, Christian warriors. They're selling safety while we're spinning around on a planet in space with a bunch of rocks flying around that could smack into the planet at any time. There ain't no such thing as 100% physical safety. You better get your courage up. And also, I've noticed out there, I just ran into another person like this, I mentioned death, right? God's system of creation and his system of spiritual progression has to do with death, and she just balked, and she couldn't even think about death. This is the kind of fantasy that people are living in. They really think that they won't die and the people around them won't die. They don't understand what death is, why it's important for God's system of creation to move forward, why it's important for our spiritual progression. That is his system of spiritual progression. Death is a part of it, and she can't even think about it. This is the kind of fantasy that is controlling people. It's fear. All of it is rooted in fear. And guess what? Satan is fear. It is not one guy with goat legs and horns and a pitchfork. Satan is the force of fear. And that's why I'm bringing ancient Christianity back, because ancient Christians taught how to build your courage and absolutely eradicate fear. When it crops up in the mind, just you stomp on it with your courage. You can get to this point, Christian warriors. You just have to be brave enough to do it and do the work, internal and external. Internal work is unwinding all of that trauma. I've talked about this in past sermons. Go review. So, ladies and gentlemen, now that I've cleared the room of all the little crybabies, the people who cannot stand meat for warriors and they'd rather have the milk for babies, now that we have our real congregation left, we're going to do our exercises. The real Christian warriors are the ones left in the room today, and I am so happy to have you here with me. I know it's tough to increase our number. It's because people don't want to accept responsibility, and they don't want to do stuff. They want to be slaves and crybabies, and they don't want to be warriors. That's why it's difficult to increase our number. They would rather believe in fantasy about themselves, about the world around them, and that ain't us. Which is why we do our exercises, because we gotta feel good as we go to battle for our Father out there. And it's to uplift our attitudes. It's not for ego. It's not to stroke some narcissistic need for feeling good. It's not hedonism, because anytime that we experience pleasure as Christian warriors, we know that we must do so through moderation and responsibility. Abstinence is never the answer. That's for dumb animals. Dumb animals who can't control themselves, that's where abstinence, they think it's necessary. Real Christian warriors are masters of their thoughts and emotions and actions. Addiction can't hold us. Infatuation can't hold us. We are the masters. And that's why we feel good, to uplift these attitudes. Because if you can be led around by your emotions, Christian warriors, you can be led around by influence, words, promises, threats, lies, whatever, paychecks. Led around on a leash, like a dumb animal, 666. Not accepting Christ, 777, that's 666, being led around on a leash by emotions. And that's what all the media out there is trying to lead people around by their emotions, because people don't think. They want to feel first and then act like dumb animals. But if you can be led around on a leash, led around by influence and emotion, then you can bet that Satanists are holding that leash. Take the leash off your necks. And if you're feeling depressed, which is a clinical word for sad, no, not everyone can have the physical chemical imbalance of manic depression. It's actually pretty rare. But if you're feeling sad, I'd say that's a pretty reasonable response to that hell world. I'm sad that people can't grasp this information through the cloud of nonsense fantasy that they've been taught, and all their emotional conditioning. They can't accept this. That makes me sad, being tasked by our Father to teach this stuff to my physical detriment every day. My family is poor, so sure, that makes me a little sad, but I gotta do it. And I ain't gonna sit around like a crybaby feeling sorry for myself. No, I put my head up, I keep my chin up, and I face that world like a warrior, an emissary for our Father. And you can do that too, Christian warriors. That sadness won't go away for very long if you're trying to attack it with drugs and escapism. It won't be long till it's back. You gotta do something about it. You gotta get control of your thoughts, your emotions, your actions. Accept Christ. And if you're feeling anxious, which is basically a clinical word for fear, I asked someone the other day to name what anxiety is. They didn't say fear, because none of their psychologists or psychiatrists told them that anxiety is fear. It's a synonym of it. Just panicking like a dumb animal. Imagine like a chimpanzee just freaking out because it's afraid. That's essentially what people want out of their lives when they say, oh, I just suffer from anxiety. I just can't help it. I need some drugs. I need to escape. Fear and sadness are both emotional states that our Father gave us as alarm systems to change the condition out there with our moral and careful action. That's why they exist. Same with the physical body. Pain exists because it's an alarm system for us to make some changes physically, with care and with morality. So if you're feeling sad or fearful, those are normal responses. They don't require drugs, they require action to change the condition out there. We're all getting monumental struggles from Hellworld, and it's because people have stopped taking responsibility for themselves. Like I often say, I am 0% Republican, 0% Democrat, but 100% 1776 American patriot, because I understand what our founding fathers and a few mothers created this constitutional republic for. It was a set of trainer wheels. It's an experiment. And the only way that it works is with a coast-to-coast militia, everyone taking responsibility, everyone armed, everyone a good cop, everyone looking out for each other like a big family. This country is our home. It can have walls. It can have locked doors if we want. Our country is not the government. Our country is our countrymen and countrywomen, our neighbors, our family. That coast-to-coast militia is downtrodden and almost dead, and it must be revived for our constitutional republic to operate correctly. If we had our militia up and running, one big family, not all separate flags, different regions and all that stuff. No, one big family, one flag, the stars and the bars. Having that coast-to-coast militia, one big family, one big group of good cops, that's taking responsibility for ourselves. And people aren't doing that anymore. That's why we have a hell world out there. If we had that coast-to-coast militia, and you're born into it, you don't have to sign up anywhere. You're born in the United States of America, you're part of it. But if that was healthy, and we all realized our responsibility as children of God, all with the same God-given rights, no representative would dare doing what they're doing. They wouldn't even dare collecting immoral taxes off us. They'd institute a voluntary lottery system to keep the infrastructure running. That's what would happen. So we get struggles in Hell World, and guess what? Look in the mirror if you're looking for who's at fault for that, because we're doing nothing. We're learning nothing, we're understanding nothing, and we're doing nothing. And that's got to change, Christian warriors. So if you're feeling sad or fearful, get it out of your head. Do something about it. Learn, understand, do things that are moral and careful. How do you expect changes to happen in your life if all your thoughts are the same? How do you expect any change to happen if your lack of emotional control is the same? How do you expect changes to happen in your life if you're running a routine and all of your actions are the same? Sure, changes will happen, but other people will be doing them to you instead of you conducting the change like a master. So you're either a driftwood on the causal ocean, where changes are just happening to you, or you're initiating change. Which one do you want, Christian warriors? And that's why we do our exercises. We say it every week, no matter what that conditioning out there is trying to tell us. Money is not my God. We got to get emotional conditioning out of the way. I know what everyone's been taught. Leave your programming at the door and say it. Money is not my God. Get ego out of the way and understand that I'm telling you the truth, and it's measurable. I'm not telling anyone to believe anything. I'm telling people to know it, or it just stays in your consideration file. I'm telling people that you can't be disconnected from your Father. I'm telling people to pray directly to God the Father. No intermediaries. That's the big difference between Christians after the ancient teachings and everyone else who claims it. So let's say it again and really mean it. Money is not my God. My God is not money. My value is not determined by a bank account number, and it is not determined by how much stuff I have or how fancy that stuff is, or whether that stuff and that money gives me status in this hell world. None of that matters. My God is God the Father, the creator that set all things into motion, the eternal force of love. Money is not my God. Christian warrior, you are inherently valuable, and nothing can take away your value, nothing can diminish it, but you, through your thoughts, emotions, and actions. Those are the only ways that you can express yourself in these expressions. If people are trying to tell you that you are worthless because you don't have status, or you don't have a certain number in your bank account, or you don't have stuff or fancy stuff, then stop listening to those people, Christian warriors. You can improve your lot in life in a moral and careful way just by trusting in your Father and behaving within the parameters of His law. The reward shouldn't be more approval, more comfort, more safety. The reward is spiritual, Christian warriors. And if no one wants to see that, then I'm not sure I can help many people. Obviously, our congregation stands at about 100 people on a good week, and that's pretty sad. But I ain't gonna stop. We all have to trust in our Father. When we do the right thing, our needs will be met. But everyone, when they hear that sentence, they think our physical needs will be met. No, it might be your spiritual needs, your spiritual progression that needs work. Those are the needs that might be met. We don't know which one. We just got to keep doing the right thing. Behaving with care, with nonviolence, with self-defense, being the master of our thoughts, emotions, and actions. Getting rid of the confusion, understanding that world out there. So let's get courage to shine through these physical bodies We are warriors, indomitable, powerful, ready to face this Sunday, face the rest of the week, take in the knowledge, understand it, and behave properly. Takes courage to do all that stuff. When people come at you with fear, saying fear this, fear that, or even people who claim Christianity telling you to fear your Father, reject all that. Our Father is the eternal force of love. Love your Father. Satan is fear, and get it out of your head. Let's let courage shine through these physical bodies, beating down Satan in its aspect of fear. Let's get understanding to shine through these physical bodies. Make the request, show the desire. God will answer you. If you come at it with a halfway lazy approach, you ain't gonna get results. Sit quietly with your Father for a half hour a day. Do the internal work. Show the desire. God will answer you. Let's get understanding to shine through these physical bodies. No more nonsense. No more fantasy. Let's get healing to shine through these physical bodies. Sure, we have physical protocols, care that we employ to maintain these physical bodies. We got to be careful out there in hell world, where one group of very successful Satanists, because no one's standing up to them, is poisoning our food, our air, our water. We got to be careful out there, and it doesn't mean being afraid of everything. It just means doing what you can and being a resolute Christian warrior. Saying no, standing up for yourself, standing up against bullies, you know, what ancient Christians taught people. So when we get those physical protocols from untrustworthy institutions of false authority, like the medical institution and the scientific institutions now being fully controlled by bribery, essentially money is God to them, we know that we can't fully trust them, so we got to do extra research. If you don't have time, stop binge watching stuff on Netflix. I don't know why you're watching that anyway. They push pedophilia. They got a bunch of Satanist rats sitting on their board. But stop binge watching TV shows and actually do some research. Get some knowledge, understand it, and behave properly. But aside from all those physical protocols, we got to let healing shine through these physical bodies. Visualize what can be done, where God's healing light is shining through your physical body, eradicating all illness and discomfort, showing you the way, guiding your research. Listen to your guardian angel and by extension God the Father. Let's let healing shine through these physical bodies. Let's get all of our power back. Make the request. Say, God, how can I be a better emissary for you? Let's take up his armor. That is knowledge, understanding, moral action, accepting Christ. That is the armor of God. It takes away confusion. Like if you point a gun at some tribal guy who's never been approached by anyone with modern technology, if you pointed a gun at him, he wouldn't get it. He'd just sit there and get shot. So let's put on the armor of God the Father. Take in that knowledge, understand it, behave properly. When someone's threatening us, we know what's happening. We're not confused. We're not stricken with fear, hiding in a corner. We put on his armor so we know what's going on. Let's take up the sword of Jesus Christ, our honored teacher, his name being synonymous with God's truth. That's what he taught in his parables. If you don't get that, go back to the basics. If you think Jesus is going to fix all your problems for you, that's not ancient Christianity right there. That's the warped modern version. And you got to get it out of your head. Fantasy has to get out of your head. Do you think our Father created crybabies and slaves, or do you think he created warriors? Really look at it. Be honest with yourself. We got to put on the armor of God the Father, take up the sword of Jesus Christ, and go to battle against these Satanists. We got to stand strong, resolute, powerful, indomitable Christian warriors. That's what you are. And that's what these exercises are all about. Getting pumped up for the week ahead, doing what's right, doing what's careful, full of care, doing what's moral, objective morality, remembering that our God-given rights are inherent and they are physical, they are property rights. Ever since I saw that rat Satanist punk, he doesn't understand he's a Satanist, but he is. That's why they're steering him around, saying that there ain't no such thing as human rights, which are essentially God-given rights. What a load of nonsense. And I'll say it just like I said that other sermon. Human rights, God-given rights, our rights, we are born with them. No constitution or government gives it to us. No. We're born with it because they are property rights. All God-given rights are property rights. You were born into your body, you own it, no one else does. There's your proof right there. Human rights exist, they are objective, they are physical. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're feeling pumped up, powerful, ready to face that week ahead and do something effective with your time. Remember, the two currencies that we get are time and attention. Those are our spiritual currencies. That's why you spend time. That's why you pay attention. So hopefully you're doing something effective with your time and attention this coming week. Accepting Christ, becoming the master of your thoughts, emotions, and actions, behaving with care, with nonviolence, with self-defense, behaving with responsibility. With our exercises out of the way, let's do Dear Pastor Clifton. And this is a segment in our sermons where we hijack a request for advice that's heading toward one of these psychologists or psychiatrists that work for some publication. Because often when people are asking for advice, they want to be told that it's not their fault, or they want to be talked to like a little baby. Oh, you just gotta try harder. There's nothing you're doing wrong. You just stay the course. There's nothing that's gotta change. It's everyone else's fault. That's what they want to hear. And the reason why we hijack these requests for advice is to give advice from the perspective of a Christian after the ancient teachings, telling people what they need to hear rather than what they want to hear. And I'll grab one of these questions from either left-wing websites or right-wing websites. I just pick at random, and then we go from there. Now, Dear Pastor Clifton is not some attempt to just throw out all the science of psychology. No, all measurement is worthwhile. But if you look at the scientific field of psychology and psychiatry, they're basically measuring and tracking the behavior of people stuck in beast consciousness. That's 666. Animal nature, not in control of their thoughts, not in control of their emotions, not in control of their actions. Now, a very slim percentage of that would be people who truly can't help it and they have a physical chemical imbalance, but the vast majority do not. Basically, if everyone accepted Christ, that is, being the master of your thoughts, emotions, and actions, and behaving with care, with nonviolence, and with self-defense, accepting Christ as the ancient Christians taught it, if everyone behaved like that, then there would be nothing to measure. But this is not an attempt at sidestepping or throwing out all of the scientific field of psychology. No, it is not. All measurement is worthwhile. I would recommend thumbing through a psychology book. Just go buy a textbook for one of these colleges and go through it. Psychology 101. While you're at it, pick up an astronomy book. So all of that aside, let's get into our first hijacked plea for advice. And it says, Dear Pastor Clifton, I'm, in parentheses, she, her, I bet you can tell which website I grabbed this from, left wing or right wing, I'm, she, her, being ignored by a coach at my new gym. Someone with pronouns being mad that they're not getting attention? You don't say. Let's go on. For context, I've been participating in a martial art for the past 5 years. Really? Usually when people are in martial arts, they say which one. So she's claiming that she's been participating in a martial art for 5 years. Let's go on. While the sport is male-dominated, man, I'm getting serious red flags so far. All of the coaches I've had were always welcoming to me and the other women, except for this one. Dun dun dun. In the 6 weeks I've been at this gym, so she said she's been participating for 5 years, and now some reason or another she's at a new place for 6 weeks, and she doesn't like the coach of whatever martial art she's claiming to study. In the 6 weeks I've been at this gym, this coach hasn't said hello to me, he won't give me feedback during class, and he won't even make eye contact with me. And of course, the questions that are arising in my mind, how big is the class? Is this really a problem of the coaching, or is someone really interested in pronouns also concerned about martial arts being male-dominated? Is this person just not getting the exclusive attention that she wants? And this is very typical of a lot of the left-wing liberal side of our country, which is only 18%, and I'm being generous with that figure. I do not think it's half and half. I think that whole half and half fantasy version of reality was propagated through Satanist-controlled media and all of the rigged elections. saying, oh man, what a close race, all the time, every single time. Oh, so close, we're just so perfectly divided, half and half. And then you look at other demographics, like, say, the people who claim some denomination of Christianity in our country, and that's somewhere over 70%. Those two things don't mix, obviously. And as you know, Christian warriors, I don't see myself as Republican or Democrat, because in 1776, when this country, this experiment, these trainer wheels began, the Constitutional Republic, there wasn't a false dialectic of right versus left in our country. We were all Americans back then. Even one of our founders, George Washington, stated in his farewell address in 1796 not to split into political parties. So as I've said many times before, I view the false dialectic of right versus left as mommy versus daddy. People who want government to be mommy versus people who want government to be daddy. And the people who want government to be mommy, which would be liberals, Democrats, they don't just want equal rights, they want exclusive rights. So we gotta take this whole account, this whole plea for advice, with a grain of salt. I've been paying attention, and I have yet to see him interact with any women at all. Except for his wife. I thought maybe he's just a misogynist. Oh, second red flag. So we got pronouns. We got concern over martial arts being male-dominated. And now we have the very first assessment of her not getting enough attention to be, he must be a misogynist. So she says, I thought maybe he's just a misogynist and thinks women shouldn't be doing this sport. And here's where she backtracks. But he is so encouraging of his wife's training. He even seems like a nice guy. I don't want to be ignored by this guy forever, because getting attention during class is essential to improving in this sport. I don't know if there is anything I can do to get him to acknowledge me. So she's at a gym, for one thing. She's not paying a private trainer of any martial art here. This is at a gym, so he's employed by the gym. And this whole account is starting to seem like one of those Yelp reviews where people are complaining, giving 2 stars for a restaurant because they didn't say bless you when they sneezed or something like this. Immediately, I want to know how big the class is. So what the psychiatrist starts telling this person in this publication is that, oh, this is a cut and dry case of the wife of the instructor being so jealous that he can't even look at other women. That might actually play a part in it. But we're getting a very one-sided account from Pronoun Lady, who is concerned about misogyny and male-dominated martial arts sports at a gym, participating in what is just a perk of being at the gym. Now it's very possible this trainer, this martial arts instructor at a gym, he may not be a very good teacher where you're supposed to give each student equal time as much as you can, and he may have a jealous wife, or he may just be one of those people who plays on the side of courtesy very strongly, like I do with my wife, because I love my wife, and I don't want her to feel like I'm looking at other girls or paying attention to all sorts of other people but her all the time. However, if your wife's in the class that you're instructing, you're going to have to give other people some time. So the psychiatrist is saying, well, you're paying for this service, so you demand it, or just leave the gym, or complain, which she could do, and that would be one way to go about it. He probably isn't too concerned with who filters in and out of his class because it's just voluntary participants anyway. It's probably different faces every week. So my advice to this young lady would be, stop using pronouns. That stuff is ridiculous and it means nothing. And when this stupid trend passes, the backlash is going to be horrendous. The only reason the trend exists is not because half of the country is liberal Democrat and pumping their fist over these stupid views. No. The trend of paying attention to pronouns and all that nonsense only exists because Satanists and psychopaths in the command positions of institutional authority are pushing it through media channels. They're using their influence and spreading it far and wide. One of my teachers once said, if something comes out of nowhere and is suddenly everywhere, then that's the cult. So that's my first bit of advice. Drop the pronoun nonsense. That stuff means nothing. You're either female or male, or, very rarely, a hermaphrodite. Typically one of those two things, or maybe that third thing. Because, as I contend, these are sloppily bioengineered atom human bodies. So, lots of weird mutations keep springing up because we did not evolve into these forms. So you're going to get a hermaphrodite once in a while, just like you're going to get mental illness once in a while, and just like you're going to get primary psychopathy, born psychopaths, the insect mind, the mental defects that they are, you'll get psychopaths born among our species at a rate of about 3%. But all of that aside, my second bit of advice to this young lady is to follow the instruction. Maybe you're doing so well that there's no improvement that he needs to remark about. What if that's the case? If you want private one-on-one training, you're going to have to pay for it outside of your gym. It's going to have to be not a gym perk, but someone you actually pay for their services because they're good at teaching. That would be my second bit of advice. Very similar to what the psychiatrist is already saying. Leave because he's a scared little kept man and he can't get away from his wife's jealousy. When he's being entirely courteous, if he's just being in love with his wife, that's fine. But when you're a teacher, you got to actually pay attention to the other people. However, we got to take this whole account with a grain of salt because it sure seems like this person just wants exclusive attention. And my third bit of advice to this young lady would be stop worrying about misogyny, stop worrying about males dominating martial arts because, of course, our bodies are built differently, males versus females. Take an all-girls course if you want. There's so much of her complaint that's in her control. She's not paying for someone's exclusive services, so she's not paying for an actual teacher. It's someone who's attached to the gym. We don't know if this instructor is good at what he does, or if he's just a hire-on and doesn't really care, and he doesn't have a set group of students that he cares about. He just has faces phasing in and out of his classes every single week. We don't know. But that's my third bit of advice to this young lady is stop worrying about misogyny and male-dominated industries or martial arts classes. Martial arts classes can be tricky because it doesn't seem like there's all girls and all boys in these classes. It seems to be a mix, and you're always going to run into the trouble when you're pairing off against an opponent. If it's girl versus boy, boy versus girl, the guys are going to have a strength advantage, and typically a height advantage as well. And that's just how we are built. So take an all-girls class with an instructor who isn't part of a gym. That would be my third bit of advice. Stop worrying about misogyny. Stop worrying about your pronouns. Stop worrying about whether martial arts is male-dominated or not. Stop worrying about all that. Get out of the class. Get into an all-girls class taught by a female instructor to where that person actually cares about all the students who are giving her money per week, and not just some gym hire-on. And I guess my fourth bit of advice, just for fun, would be if you're interested in self-defense, martial arts is a great way forward, but being a woman, you have to understand that you are at a disadvantage against men in a lot of cases, because physiologically, our sexes are different. So the fourth, just for fun, bit of advice I could give this young lady is get a firearm, learn how to use it. That's one thing that every woman across our beautiful country can do to even the score and protect themselves. Realize your position in our coast-to-coast militia, our big family of good cops. No, not badge-wearing police officers. I'm talking about understanding that a coast-to-coast militia is what our founders said was necessary for our constitutional republic to succeed, to function correctly, and of course, a coast-to-coast militia is needed for those trainer wheels to eventually come off. So get armed, young lady. Let's move on to the next one. Dear Pastor Clifton, I suffered an injury that caused internal bleeding, which then gave me iron deficiency anemia. I was battling its symptoms of depression and anxiety. Okay, that's fear and sadness, and I'm not sure if that's actually symptoms of iron deficiency anemia. And one of the beautiful things about the internet is that we can just go look at what iron deficiency anemia is, and that is a condition in which blood lacks adequate healthy red blood cells. So red blood cells carry oxygen to the body's tissues, and because the the blood cells, the red blood cells, are iron insufficient, the red blood cells don't carry enough oxygen to the body, and that's what iron deficiency anemia is. Now, what are the actual symptoms? Extreme fatigue, because of course you're not getting proper oxygen to your muscles, your bones, your cells regrowing in all parts of your body. Weakness, pale skin, chest pain, fast heartbeat or shortness of breath, headache, dizziness, or lightheadedness, cold hands and feet, inflammation or soreness of your tongue, brittle nails, unusual cravings for non-nutritive substances such as ice, dirt, or starch, that's usually called pica, poor appetite, especially in infants and children with iron deficiency anemia. Notice how there's no depression or anxiety in there, and these are pretty hardcore symptoms. I don't suppose you'd go long before actually seeing a doctor. So he says, this is translated, I was battling its symptoms of sadness and fear before I was diagnosed. Never having had any mental health struggles in my life, look, sadness and fear are not mental health struggles. This race to the bottom that people have been taught for the last 20 years at least in colleges is pathetic. Everyone's being given an excuse to just race to the bottom and let fear and sadness take them over. Not everyone can have physical, chemical imbalances. It's rare. When you give everyone an excuse, they're just going to say, oh, well, it's not my problem. It's just an accident of birth. I'm just mental health challenged all the time. Accept Christ. Get control of your thoughts, your emotions, your actions. You are the master. You are one of God's children. He gave everyone the exact same God-given rights, and you have immense potential, and you have value. So this guy's plea for advice is just smacking with victim mentality so far. There is no master here. There's just the slave. So let's continue. I had no idea what was happening to me. I was happy and calm my whole life until this medical condition changed my behavior considerably. Yeah, when something's wrong to someone and it's new to them, it could be a real bummer. Like most people, unfortunately, living in dumb animal nature, 666 beast consciousness, they don't think illness will ever befall them. They don't think that damage will ever be done to these physical bodies. Even worse, they think that they won't die and the people around them won't die, just living in fantasy. And when anyone brings it up, they say, oh man, I don't want to think of that. I don't want to think of that. A girl just said this to me the other day. I just mentioned death. And she said, oh my God, that's so grim. Like, she just couldn't even fathom for 5 seconds contemplating death and how it's just a reality. It's part of God's system of creation and part of God's system of spiritual progression. It's just a reality. So when people like that have their first surgery or first bit of bad news regarding these physical bodies getting old, broken, and dead, it's a bummer, and this guy's using it as an excuse to say, wow, I just have mental health problems. I'm just so sad about having iron deficiency anemia. Be the master. Be a real woman. Be a real man. Be a Christian warrior. Stop being a little victim slave. Realize all the way through life that these bodies get old, broken, and dead. And that's part of God's system of creation and his system of spiritual progression. It's necessary. If you want to stave it off, employ your care to maintain your physical body and your mind. But you're not going to maintain your body past these expiration dates. Be a real man. Be a real woman. Be a Christian warrior. So let's continue with this victim mentality plea for advice. My wife of 20 years left me. So I'm going to guess this guy's around 40 years old. I was diagnosed with the iron deficiency anemia after she had left. So this was after the divorce. After the diagnosis, I was able to stop my blood loss and cure the anemia. Its symptoms went away, and the symptoms he's talking about were depression and anxiety, or translated sadness and fear. How much you want to bet there were underlying issues besides the iron deficiency anemia? So it looks like we have to take this plea for advice with a grain of salt as well. So we got help after the divorce. Here we go, continuing on. I was sure my wife and I would reconcile after my diagnosis, but she says I was using using the illness as an excuse for my behavior. You don't say. She doesn't understand it was the cause. She mistakenly believes I am permanently mentally ill. Well, look, if you're blaming depression and anxiety, sadness and fear on iron deficiency anemia, that seemed to have been recent enough for you to hit your 40s and not notice it. I don't think that you're mentally ill as a problem that you were born with, as in a physical chemical imbalance, but I do think that you've been playing the victim and the slave all your life and living in fantasy, which that could be very intolerable to someone who realistically looks out at that world and measures and observes. That kind of personality doesn't mesh well with someone who is constantly playing the victim, constantly playing the slave, and living in just total fantasy where I just gotta strive for happiness no matter what that mirror is telling me, no matter what the world around me, the outside world outside that window is telling me, no matter what, I'm just gonna ignore everything and whistle and skip along. This is not to say that everything's doom and gloom, like I say all the time. Christian warriors, the whole point of being a warrior for our Father is that we can live in both worlds. We can see the world for what it is and fight to change it, and we can experience all the love and the beauty in God's beautiful reality. We can do both. Because we're warriors, we're not crybabies and we're not slaves. Doesn't mean you gotta be all grim like these characters in these action movies that are just perpetual frown on their face. No, you can do both. So we get more from the wife. This is as he's writing it in his plea for advice. She doesn't understand that these symptoms went away once the illness was cured. She says it brought out my true personality, which is not true, okay? My wife and family are my whole life. Now, just that statement right there, I was just saying in other parts of this sermon and other sermons that your identity is not from the outside. The outside stuff does not determine who you are. Your identity is spiritual. Yes, this expression that we're having has external forces playing upon it, shaping our personality in some ways, but we have to remember that our guardian angel, and by extension God the Father's Holy Spirit, is inside these physical bodies, and they've had many expressions besides these ones. Yes, this is part of ancient Christianity. No, it's not my opinion. However, realizing this for your knowledge file takes you to do the spiritual work. Go inward so you can prove it to yourself. Otherwise, it's just words hitting your consideration file from me, Pastor Clifton. He's saying that his wife and his family are his whole life. That's his identity. His wife wasn't around 20 years ago when he was a kid, so what was his identity then? Student? Son of his mother? Something like this? His kids weren't around 20 years ago, so that's not part of his identity. Yeah, they're a big responsibility to bring up the next generation properly, and they take 100% of our love at all times because they're our kids and we care about them and love them, but they're not your identity. Your identity is not husband, father. Those are just facets of your identity. Those are responsibilities. Your identity is spiritual, Christian warriors. Spiritual first, all else second. If you want to know who you are truly, sit with your Father for about 30 minutes a day, like I described a couple sermons back about going out of body. Sitting with your Father, even if going out of body is not your goal, sitting with your Father for a half hour a day just quietly, not moving a muscle, not falling asleep, is good for you. You will find yourself doing that. And you will get a handle of your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions are kind of easy to get a handle on because you either do stuff or you don't do stuff. It takes muscles to do action. But you'll get a better handle on your thoughts and emotions doing that. Do it. Do the work, Christian warriors. Your Father loves being with you. He's just waiting for you to understand His truth and His law. Now, sitting with your Father is something that is so worth it. Spend time with our Father. Half hour a day, same time a day. If you can't manage the same time a day, every single day, you really have to rearrange your priorities. You're way too much in the physical, and you got to understand that you are both a spiritual expression having an experience in the physical. You have to understand that you are both right now. So he thinks his wife and his kids are his whole life, and he doesn't have an identity outside of that. He really needs to work on himself, not become a selfish jerk or anything like this, where he goes the opposite direction and just doesn't care about his wife and his kids or something like this. No, he has to understand who he truly is, and understand that his body gets old, broken, and dead, understand that everyone else's body gets old, broken, and dead, and that these moments, these minutes, these seconds, they matter. In physical matter, they matter. So make the best of them, and don't take any nonsense. Don't be a doormat. Spread God's love. Most importantly, agape. Then Philos and Eros can fight for second place, but spread God's love to our brothers and sisters out there. We all have the same exact God-given rights, and we're all facing the exact same physical challenges too, and even non-physical challenges, stuff that is thoughts and emotions. We're facing those same challenges as well. When sadness creeps up, we gotta learn to be a warrior, not a crybaby and a slave. When fear creeps up, we gotta build our courage to knock it down. Those things everyone has a challenge with, and they have to overcome them, not be given an excuse by these lab coat, priest coat wearers of institutional false authority, saying, oh, it's okay, you can't help it, just take these drugs. No, you gotta build yourself. You gotta go inward, understand your true identity. So let's continue. I didn't get this medical condition on purpose. Oh, wham. We have a 4-year-old daughter I am a great father to. My wife is throwing away our family and trying to take my daughter away from me because I had a curable illness, which I no longer have. How can I get her to understand what happened and save our family? And when you look at what the psychiatrist tells this person, it's just, I'm sorry, try to tell your wife that it was iron deficiency anemia. I'm sorry this happened to you. That's the only advice she's giving. So my advice to this young man is go inward. Your identity is not external, it's internal. So figure that out first. Your wife is a separate human being that's going to do what she wants to do, and she may have problems herself. We don't know. This is from the perspective of the person asking for advice. So we don't know if he's coloring his wife as this cruel lady or not, but she's going to be a separate person just like your kid is a separate person. And it's going to be another difficult divorced family in our United States of America because people often get married for all the wrong reasons. Look, Christian Warriors, every time I do Dear Pastor Clifton, I keep saying this. If your reasons for getting married are, oh, this person's attractive and they better stay that way forever, that's the wrong reason to get married. If your reasons are, this person has resources that I enjoy the status from, the comfort from, and he better have those resources forever, or her, that is the wrong reason to get married. Because both of those things are changing all the time. Your financial stability in Hell World typically changes a lot, and definitely these bodies get old, broken, and dead. So if you think that you're going to be attractive forever, you got a decade, maybe 2, and that second decade is hard work. So don't base your marriage on that, because those things change. Only marry the people that you are best friends to, and understand that the first priority in a working marriage is, does the other person know right from wrong? Do they know objective morality? That's the most important thing, especially if you're going to raise a kid. That's what you have to teach your kid. So this is going to be yet another divorce in our beautiful country where people are marrying for all the wrong reasons. However, it's not all doom and gloom. You still have rights to see your kid, and hopefully you won't raise her to be a little slave victim like you seem to be. So my advice is this. Find out who you truly are by going inward. Stop telling yourself that you are this or you are that due to the outside world. You are not your job. You are not only a father. You are not only a husband. You started out being totally different than both of those things. Those are just responsibilities that you have. That's not what you are. That's not your identity. My second bit of advice to this young man is become the master of your thoughts and your emotions. Stop thinking like a slave and a victim. That is not very attractive to any real woman out there. And I guess my third all-encompassing bit of advice to this young man would be grow your spiritual self. You have a responsibility. You are completely stuck in beast consciousness. You are focusing on all material. Even if you have a huge love of family, you're tying it into material stuff like, this is my identity. You need to understand the spiritual side of yourself and everybody else. And while you're doing that, pick up a psychology textbook. Be honest with yourself and see how much of it applies to you. So that's it for Dear Pastor Clifton. Hopefully that advice goes out to people with similar circumstances or someone in their life that can get what they need to hear instead of what they want to hear. Alright, Christian Warriors, let's do Know Your Enemy. Because what kind of general goes to battle with another general without first understanding his tactics? None of them do. And what kind of fighter, like a UFC champ, goes into the ring without first studying his opponent's moves? None of them do. So what kind of Christian warrior could hope to put a dent in that Satanist army out there, which unfortunately is around 15% of our population, and at least 84% of the other part of the population are just useful dupes for these Satanists that are steering them around by their emotions. How are we going to change that world out there, Christian warrior? How are we going to go to battle against Satanists without first understanding their ideology, their methodology, their symbolism? None of us will if we don't know our enemy. That is goal number one in almost every single war strategy, is knowing your enemy. You don't just sit in a corner and pray and hope God the Father or some savior comes back and cleans your apartment for you. No. You take responsibility. Prayer is useful, yes, but prayer must be coupled with action so that it is effective. So Satanism, I go into it in detail in my book, A Return to Ancient Christianity, which you could buy or listen to for free. And I've gone into detail on their methodology, ideology, and symbolism in past sermons. Please go review. Really, what I use Know Your Enemy for nowadays is to see if they're telegraphing their moves at all. Satanists will always telegraph their moves. They will tell you what they're doing before they do it and while they're doing it. And no, it's not called predictive programming or any overly complex nonsense. They're simply doing it because to a Satanist, not to say no is to say yes. Not to do anything about it is to consent. That's why they do it. That way they could look at each other and go, well, they're just behaving like slaves, so I guess we're allowed to do this. We told them we'd punch them in the face yesterday. They did nothing, so we punched them in the face. That's not my problem. That's actually how they think. And there's one Satanist cult on our planet that happens to be very successful called the Sabbatean Frankist Zionists. And they actually think that by using a book of Revelation as a roadmap, that they can do all the most horrendous evil things like murder, rape, assault, abuse kids, all sorts of stuff, in order to get God to fix everything earlier. That's actually what they think. So that's why they telegraph moves, for both of those reasons. Because not to say no is to say yes. Not to do anything is to consent. Mostly what Satanists want to do is to invert, pervert, or divert attention away from God's truth and law. They want to take God's truth and law and invert it. They want to take God's truth and law and pervert it. They want to take God's truth and law and divert attention away from it and do their little fantasy cover stories that everyone just gobbles up. I am including anyone who thinks that saviors are coming back or God the Father is coming back to clean their apartment for them. I am including you in that fantasy gobbling group of people. So a lot of stuff happened in the last week that's noteworthy, and I just want to rush through some news articles and give a tiny little bit of commentary, and then we can move on to our objective Bible study. Keep in mind, Christian warriors, that the season of sacrifice, which is a dark, occult, Satanist holiday, a period of time that spans from roughly March 17th or so on to May 1st. It is called the season of sacrifice, and this is where, if they can get it done, they want to murder a bunch of people, and they're getting it done in Israel right now, that exact thing. They're also getting it done in Ukraine right now, that exact thing, along with many, many other places. And remember, child abuse is raging all over our planet because people are too afraid and too sick to their stomachs to even look at it or acknowledge it. And the hell world persists and continues because of that cowardice. But the season of sacrifice is among us. March 17th, roughly, really it's like March 21st or so, but sometimes they kick things off a little early, to around May 1st, and we're looking for anything symbolic. If they're doing the killing of the king, they're going to try and assassinate someone for public trauma. That will be a male figure of some popularity or importance or something like this. And if they're doing the murdering of the divine feminine, they will pick something that has to do with the feminine aspect. So keep your eyes out, Christian warriors. If you see something, don't only say something like run and tattle to some enforcer class of the false institutions of authority. Don't just say something, but do something. We've also had in the news the hilarious Google AI named Gemini very overtly propagating the cult's message, just putting it right up in people's faces, asking them to show a white family, and the AI just refuses to do so. Ask them to do a black family, and you get tons and tons of pictures of black families. Also depicting 1800s Scottish residents as all sorts of different races except for Caucasian, and people were noting that Google AI Gemini, it was very difficult to get them to show any Caucasian people at all. So what else happened in the news? We had that same Google AI Gemini being asked the question if pedophilia was wrong. And guess what the Gemini AI said? Bleeding out the messaging from Satanist cults all around the world, saying, oh, this is a nuanced subject and it's so complex. No, sexually abusing children is wrong, period, the end. Children cannot give informed consent. That's why we have a law distinguishing what a minor is. That's anyone under 18 years old. It's just a happy coincidence that it falls into line of what everyone just intuitively knows about being a child and being an adult. So yes, pedophilia is wrong, Gemini AI. It is not a nuanced subject. I swear this is part of a bunch of rat Satanists who have taken over all of the marketing and all of the propaganda of what used to be just the LGB community and started adding all sorts of letters to it. And gay people around the world, you better get a handle on your little pride group, because Satanists who do not have your best interests in mind have hijacked it. And they are looking to add the letter P for pedophile at the end of all of that long string of alphabet numbers and plus signs and all sorts of stuff. That is their goal. So get a hold of your community. People with gender dysphoria need help. They don't need to be encouraged to go down fantasy paths where they try to surgically play dress up all of their lives. They need help with their gender dysphoria. We also have social media users noticing that the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, decides to put 2 Caucasian girls on some Twitter post or X post talking about organized mass gang lootings of stores. And everyone, of course, attacked this and said, are you kidding me? Every single bit of footage has everything but young Caucasian ladies. Another article says, Queensland Supreme Court, that's in Australia, the Queensland Supreme Court rules COVID vaccine mandates for police and paramedics unlawful. Not only is this a few years too late, but it's also unlawful for force injecting all of your citizenry, and that's not due to any government law, that's due to it violating God's law. We are born into these bodies, we own them, we decide what they get injected with or not. It doesn't have to do with any constitution or any government or anything like that. It is our human, God-given right. But slowly, after many years, people are starting to get a tiny bit of a clue, and the government rats that are just following orders and they have to feed their family and every Nuremberg excuse are starting to admit some stuff. Not that anyone will do anything about it, but it's good to see that truth is breaking through the nonsense fantasy. And that's why God actually wins, is because God's truth is like a tidal wave. It'll just beat down every barrier eventually. essentially. What Satanists struggle the most with is hiding God's truth, because they know all the dams are going to come down eventually. We had a CBS newscaster journalist lady, Catherine Herridge, being fired, and then Biden residency thugs came in and took all of her documentation, just to see what her sources were, I'd imagine, but all of this is not what happens in the constitutional republic experiment. This is not what's supposed to happen, and they wouldn't dare to do these things if we had a coast-to-coast militia, healthy, strong, and risen. Also in the news, we have Dr. Phil, a friend of Oprah Winfrey. So Dr. Phil is on The View with the absolute witch, Whoopi Goldberg, on it. They're all a bunch of cackling witches. And he starts talking about the impact that was, in his own words, horrifying, that school shutdowns during the lockdowns, I don't say during the COVID pandemic because it was a fake pandemic, they had to change the definition to pandemic to make it one, and that's what makes it fake. And that's not what shut schools down. Government lockdowns did, using prison terminology. They didn't say quarantine, they were putting it in your face, lockdowns. So he's on The View saying, wow, these school shutdowns had a horrible impact on children. And all of the coven of The View started gasping, and Whoopi Goldberg started bleeding out all these completely untrue, proven to be untrue, fabricated lies, trying to defend the narrative desperately. So I guess good for Dr. Phil, but I don't completely trust this guy, just because of the company he keeps. We also have the claim in the news that Russian intelligence foiled an assassination plot against Tucker Carlson, and during that Tucker Carlson Putin interview, Putin actually says something about the CIA trying to recruit Tucker Carlson and then not doing so. Very interesting stuff. I guess we'll have to see more on that story once we have more than one source for the claim that there was any such assassination plot against Tucker Carlson foiled by Russian intelligence. We only have one source for that, so it goes into our consideration file. And then we have the Pope. That would be the Pope underneath the Black Pope, which is a Jesuit general. But the visible white Pope, wearing the white, wearing the hat of Nimrod, he's pushing Satanist agendas so blatantly that there's a bunch of exoteric outer teachings believers in allegory, well-meaning people, I'm sure, they're starting to whisper about another schism in the Roman Catholic Church because of what this guy's doing. And it's even gotten so bad as another person in the church saying in a social media post that the Pope needs to go to heaven as fast as possible, which is kind of a cowardly way of saying he's got to die as soon as possible. And yeah, the Pope will be going to heaven for a little bit, then he'll be picking new parents and getting his skin back in the game, but he's got a lot of receiving end to unwind, I'd imagine. Too bad for him. And then we have the Fannie Willis train wreck court case, which I don't expect the corrupt judge to do anything about it. But it's pretty obvious that she was using campaign funds to go running around with her boyfriend, which of course is illegal under the constitutional republic that we pretend is healthy and still in existence. Again, these people would not dare to do this if our coast-to-coast militia was risen. Then we have in the news 3 St. Louis, Missouri men arrested after migrant woman found beaten, tied with ropes, and bleeding from her head after escaping some new denomination, I guess, of modern Christianity, a church. And if you don't know what church means, please go see other sermons. That word itself is Satanist mockery, and it is not even written down in the original Greek or the original Hebrew of our Bible. So it looks like a lot of these guys are from some country in Africa, and they got some sort of wild Christian denomination that they're propagating here in our beautiful country. So I guess we'll add one to the 400 plus exoteric believers in allegory. Because obviously beating people up is against their God-given rights. That is initiating physical harm on an innocent party. And it looks like in the news, more and more left-wing people, the 18%, are starting to realize that a bunch of people coming over the southern border is probably a bad idea, as more and more crime is happening. And guess what, Christian warriors? Because we are a coast-to-coast militia, one big family, one big group of good cops, and our constitutional republic is an experiment, trainer wheels, it is our home, our house can have locked doors if we so wish. Our house can have walls if we so wish. Then we have another article saying, huge number of Americans fear free speech is disintegrating. Yeah? Well, do something about it. That's what the Second Amendment's for. Regardless of any amendment, any constitution, any Bill of Rights, we have the God-given rights to take actions that do not initiate physical harm on innocent parties. And guess what, Christian warriors, I don't know how many times I gotta say this, spread the word that influence equals words, threats, claims, lies. All words are just influence. That is not physical action. So there is no way in God's beautiful reality that influence, words, speech is violence. There is no way. Words are not violence. Influence is not violence. Violations of God-given rights are all physical. That is initiating physical harm on an innocent party. So, free speech being endangered in our beautiful country means that the coast-to-coast militia, all of our countrymen and our countrywomen, that's what our country is, not the government, we have to do something about it. So, if they try to say, you can't say that, we stand up to these bullies, use our counter-influence and say no, and put our foot down. And then we see if the other side brings a physical violation of our God-given rights, not just more influence like saying, you can't say this, that's just influence. We counter it with our influence saying, no, you're not going to tell us what we can say and what we cannot say. And then if they bring some physical violence, we'll meet that with physical force, our God-given right of self-defensive force, and that is what the coast-to-coast militia is for. That is what all of our founders said must be in operation 100% of the time, necessary for the functioning of our state of freedom. And, like I keep saying, that coast-to-coast militia is also necessary to remove the trainer wheels when it comes time. Also in the news, we have Mitch McConnell stepping down as Republican Senate leader. This is a week after his wife's sister just mysteriously has her Tesla go in reverse and put her underwater where she drowned on Mitch McConnell's property. If you got electric stuff, it can be hacked. If it's got a computer that hooks to the internet, it can be hacked. This includes cars. So Mitch McConnell is now stepping down as Republican Senate leader. Coincidence? We don't know. It's for our consideration file. We also have a U.S. Air Force member setting fire to himself. And when we comb through this person's social media, we discover he was a nutcase. And a lot of people were asking in government how he was even allowed into the military. But his sentiment of free Palestine, like I explained before, Hamas scumbag terrorist does not equal 2.2 million Palestinians, whatever you think that is, the people living in Gaza. Those two things don't equal each other. Just like the innocent men, women, and children in Israel don't equal their corrupt Zionist, Sabbatean, Frankist government. Those two things don't equal each other. And we have in the news, crazy naked woman goes on violent rampage in wealthy LA neighborhood in broad daylight. And that wealthy LA neighborhood they're talking about is Venice Beach. You gotta be kidding me. But anyway, this lady goes crazy, starts attacking people, and most people are just filming her with their phones, but one lady, probably a store owner, pulls out a spiked baseball bat and tries to stop her. Also in the news, Tucker Carlson on the 2020 election, he is out front saying it was 100% stolen. Yeah, no kidding. And we have Rachel Maddow of an old NPR program, which NPR is funded by your immorally collected tax dollars, Americans out there, but she was on MSNBC because she doesn't have that job anymore, flipping out over the Supreme Court agreeing to hear President Trump's immunity claim. And for people watching current events closely in relation to devolution, we're expecting that immunity will be stripped from not only Trump, but everybody else, so everything they're doing right now is essentially going to be working against them later. They being the cult and all of their little cabal members. Then we have Joe Rogan and Cat Williams talking about how fluoride in drinking water lowers IQ, and I've been telling people this for decades, to which everyone says nuh-uh, 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 much like trying to bring back ancient Christianity to a world steeped in Catholicism and modern Christianity, the fantasy versions of it. I often get nuh-uh, nuh-uh. It makes me realize that the power of nuh-uh is unfortunately still very strong. So they're talking about fluoride in drinking water lowering IQ, and that's been proven so many times. I could list off all of the studies that have proven this since the 1970s, and all of them would be met with, nuh-uh, nuh-uh, quit drinking fluoride, people. You are not supposed to be able to see your pineal gland in an x-ray. And also in the news, there's a big ol' fight going on in the House of Representatives. The cult is trying to pass funding to Israel and Ukraine, mostly Ukraine, a little bit going to Israel, where they will just start money laundering and filling up the coffers of the military-industrial complex. That's basically what all of that money's for, desperately trying to protect the NATO expansion into Ukraine since at least 2014, where they were building, provably, not my opinion, chemical weapons factories. And there's a huge problem with child trafficking in Ukraine because blonde-haired, blue-eyed Caucasian girls and boys, little kids, fetch the highest prices among these Satanist rats. So all of that is on the cusp of being exposed very soon. So they are desperately trying to string out this little battle between Russian forces and the, not my opinion, Nazi forces in Ukraine. We also have a lot hitting the news about January 6th, Washington, D.C. political prisoners still in jail, and this would not even be possible if we had our coast-to-coast militia healthy. They wouldn't even dare. J6 prisoners wouldn't be in there for 3 years without a trial. That's against even the written laws that we have here, let alone those people's God-given rights. They wouldn't even dare. And in the last week, we had some lady from Politico. She appeared on MSNBC and said that if you think your rights come from God and not the government, that means you're a Christian nationalist. And everyone's head exploded who is an exoteric believer. Not really understanding why this is offensive, I guess, but I will cut through all of the silly exoteric believer nonsense and give the esoteric knower, the Christian after the ancient teachings perspective on the matter. All rights are God-given. All human rights are God-given rights, and all God-given rights / human rights are property rights. We know that they exist because you were born into your body and you own it. Governments don't own it. No one else owns it but you. And that's how you know, for a fact, objectively, physically, that there are such thing as God-given rights. They are property rights. You own your body. You were born into it. You own it. Period. The end. And that's how you cut through all of the nonsense. And if you try and look up the definition for Christian nationalists, all you'll get is a Wikipedia article, because there ain't no definition to it. It's an ever-expanding, morphing idea that the 18% has come up with. Anytime they can't go kill a baby in the womb or just do whatever they want using government as a weapon, violating other people's God-given rights, then they start crying Christian nationalism. So this lady just expanded the definition a little further, this lady from Politico, saying that if you think that rights are given to you by God and not government, that makes you a Christian nationalist. Just about the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I see a lot of exoteric believers in fantasy saying that communism's first goal is to abolish Christianity, and no, their first goal is to abolish any religion in the area that they are intending to take over, not just Christianity. It's Christianity in our country because over 70% of us identify, big finger quotes, as some denomination of modern Christianity, or in our case, Christian warriors, Christians after the ancient teaching. But that's a huge majority in this country, so of course communists are going to try and remove that first here. But they were doing different stuff in China when they successfully took over that country. They were going after Taoism and other philosophical quasi-religions in the area. So it's not communism attacking Christianity specifically, it's just any religion. And I should mention that there is esoteric Satanist underpinnings in communism, and I should also mention that the most successful Satanist cult pushing communism for the last few hundred years are the Sabbatean Frankists that are trying to take over all of Judaism. Again, I stand with every Hasidic Jew in their fight against the Zionist/Sabbatean Frankist ideology. And there's a comment in here saying, guess I'm a Christian nationalist then. Better than being a communist Marxist dirtbag. Look, Christian warriors, don't accept this little moniker of Christian nationalist. Don't use their language because they just keep expanding the definition and warping it. Just refuse all of their language. That includes Christian nationalism, it includes hate crime, it includes assault weapon. All that stuff is so ridiculous. And I guess the most obvious thing that happened in the last week was the death of, big finger quotes, Lord Jacob Rothschild, and everyone was just pumping their fists so happy about it. I hate to remind everybody that this person's influence in the cult, the Satanist cult, the Sabbatean Frankist Zionist pretending to be followers of Judaism, fake Jews cult, and that is exactly what Jacob Rothschild, all of his ilk, all of his family members, they used to be known as House Bauer, they have set up a little fiefdom in Tel Aviv, Israel. And his influence stopped in the cult long ago. They had him replaced, so it doesn't really matter that he's dead. He's been replaced with someone most likely worse. Some other psychopath, Satanist, Sabbatean, Frankist scumbag. And if anyone out there is saying, yeah, you gotta support Israel and just kill every single Palestinian because they're all scumbag Hamas terrorists. Look, you don't understand what you're talking about. You don't understand that the Israeli government is unfortunately corrupt by Sabbatean Frankist Zionists, and that all of their actions right now are governed by House Bauer, which is House Rothschild. So if you're so happy that Jacob Rothschild is dead, yet also supporting Israel as they blanket murder everybody on the Gaza Strip, whether or not they're any relation to any scumbag Hamas terrorist, then you don't know which way is up. And you need to do more research and stop just bleeding out whatever nonsense someone else programs you with. Do the research yourself so you can get a handle on nuance. You have to understand that initiating physical harm on innocent parties is against God's law, and it doesn't matter who does it. There ain't no justification, and you don't get to wear a badge and do it. There ain't no excuse. It's wrong, 100% against God's law. You do it, you're getting consequences from God's law. There are innocent men, women, and children in Gaza that have nothing to do with scumbag Hamas terrorists, just like there are innocent men, women, and children in Israel that do not have anything to do with their corrupt government. And if you initiate harm on those innocent parties, then you are doing something that is wrong. Instead of trying to pick a side and pick a flag, you should be looking at what God's law actually is and seeing who is violating it. And I'll tell you that both corrupt Israeli government and scumbag Hamas terrorists are violating it. They are violating God's law. There is no excuse. This is not about pick a side. That's stupid. So if you're so happy that Jacob Rothschild is dead and you support the corrupt government of Israel right now in blanket murdering everybody in Gaza, then you're just supporting what Jacob Rothschild wants. It is so important, Christian warriors, to identify by the enemy. And in this case, the enemy is a very successful Satanist cult called the Sabbatean Frankists. I go into this in detail in other sermons. See any sermon labeled with Zionism or Sabbatean Frankism and get an idea of who these people are. They are fakes. They are trying to take over all of Judaism. That's why Hasidic Jews always protest it, because they understand this. What Zionism is a political movement that started in the late 1800s. It is not super old or ancient or anything like this. And it was a political movement to establish this fake fantasy notion that there is such a thing as the Jewish race, and separate that fictional Jewish race with the religion, exoteric as it may be, of Judaism. That way, Sabbatean Frankists can take over all of Judaism and say, oh no, it's not just a religion, we're atheistic, secular Jews. That way they can say that. And people say, oh wow, that exists? Okay. Yeah, it's only existed for the last 150 years or so. Go look up protests by Hasidic Jews. You'll see what I mean. They're against Zionism. So that means that being anti-Zionist does not equal anti-Semitic. And I know there's a bunch of left-wing morons out there, the 18%, who are throwing around the term Zionist without knowing one little bit of what that means, because they think Zionist equals Jew, and they think Jew equals race. None of that is accurate. Get a handle on nuance and actual reality. Measurable, physical reality. You can know it. You can know God's truth. It's not something that's outside of your grasp. And just make sure during your research that you do not just trust someone on their word. You go look for the measured proof of it. A person saying he has insiders is not proof of a claim. So, Christian Warriors, that hell world out there is going to get a little bit more wild, because there's a group out there challenging the control of all those Satanists and psychopaths in command positions of institutional authority. And as they keep pressing against that power structure, things will get a lot crazier here, even in our beautiful country. So consolidate what wealth you have in your families. Get back with your families for what's going to happen in 2024, because it's going to get a little rough. And when the Satanist rats in the institutions of false authority tell you that there's some unseen enemy and you got to be afraid, don't you believe them. That includes scary viruses with zero proof that it even exists, where the only way you know that it's real is if you take a test that they warp the numbers of and the positive or negative results of. That is the unseen enemy. Scary virus. We'll tell you all about it since you can't see it, but be afraid of it. Be on your guard. Or, oh, the sun's gonna burp and it's just gonna take out all the infrastructure. Be afraid. Or, there's all these cyber hackers from Iran and Russia and China. Most likely they won't even mention China. But they did something and you can't see it, but we'll tell you all about it. And also support war with Iran and Russia. If they're saying any of the stuff, Christian Warriors, then be on the lookout. Know that our Father does not support going to war where indiscriminate murder of innocent men, women, and children is happening in all of the war zones. God the Father doesn't condone that nonsense. There is a huge difference between killing and murder. Murder is what happens when you're initiating physical harm on an innocent party. That is against God's law, period. The end, no justification. No, whoops, that's just a casualty of war, darn. Made a mistake, but they're just gonna happen. None of that thinking is allowed. You can't even call yourself any exoteric version of any religion if you think that it's okay to just murder innocents. It ain't. And that's a part of war. And if everyone says, oh, there's no other way, well, there is a way, and it's called education, spiritual growth, understanding your responsibility, teaching your kids better, teaching whoever you can reach better, accepting Christ, becoming the master of your thoughts, emotions, and actions, behaving with care, with nonviolence, with self-defense. That's the way forward. There is a way. It just takes responsibility. It takes going inward, moving your work outward. All the stuff that Christians, after the ancient teachings, taught so many hundreds of years ago, even thousands of years ago. I am not going to accept from anybody the big heaving sigh of, oh, well, that's just how the world works and war is part of it. No, there's a way forward. It's called getting your intelligence up to par. And what is intelligence? It's the mixture of intuition and intellect. That's what makes intelligence. So let's end Know Your Enemy right there. The overall message is get wise. Know your enemy and stop doing Satanists and psychopaths' bidding. There ain't no excuse. There ain't no, I just gotta follow orders, I gotta feed my family. No. You follow God's law or you get consequences, and that's it. Behave with care. Behave with nonviolence. Behave with self-defense. That's how you act morally. It's objective. No excuses. Stop doing Satanists' bidding for them. They'll put out all sorts of influence and they're waiting on enforcers to do their bidding. Stop doing it. Put your foot down, say no. And if they bring violence, meet it with your self-defensive force. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to do our objective Bible study. There are a bunch of slight differences between Christians after the ancient teachings and all of the rest of the modern variants of Christianity, including Catholicism and all 400 plus denominations of modern Christianity. Some of those differences are things like we pray directly to our Father, and we don't go through intermediaries. We understand that accepting Christ means to be the master of your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, and to behave with care, with nonviolence, and self-defense. That's extremely different than what the modern variants of Christianity think, because it has to do with personal responsibility and not believing in fantasy. Also, we understand Satan to be a force way worse than just one entity trying to ruin all of God's plans or your life, as if something could be outside of our Father's control. We know that because we have free will, there is no such thing as fate, predeterminism, prophecy, destiny. We, Christians, after the ancient teachings, also understand that you either know stuff or you don't know stuff. There ain't no such thing as faith or belief. But one of the main reasons why we do objective Bible study is because Christians, after the ancient teachings, do not take allegory literally. And they don't think the Bible is the immaculate and inspired Word of God. It is not. Immaculate means divinely clean. Inspired means something like God told someone to write it down. Now, you tell me, Christian warriors, if this sounds like something God would tell somebody to write down in the Bible. Ephesians 6:5. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear and sincerity of heart, just as you would show to Christ. 1 Timothy 6:1. All who are under the yoke of slavery should regard their masters as fully worthy of honor, so that God's name and our teaching will not be discredited. Exodus 21:1. Now these are the ordinances which you shall set before them. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go out free. And it rattles off a bunch of slave-owning protocols. Exodus 21:7. If a man sells his daughter into slavery, she will not go out the way male slaves do. Exodus 21:20. If a man beats his male or female slave with a rod and the slave dies as a direct result, he must be punished. But he is not to be punished if the slave gets up after a day or two, since the slave is his property. Does this sound like something God the Father would inspire? Does that sound immaculate, divinely clean to anyone? Be honest with yourself. This stuff is in the Bible. I'm reading it direct. Leviticus 19:20. If a man lies sexually with a woman who is a slave assigned to another man and not yet ransomed or given her freedom, a distinction shall be made. They shall not be put to death because she was not free. God does not condone slavery. Any sane Christian of all the modern variants, Catholics, any sane Christian can agree that this is not divinely clean and it is not inspired by our Father. God the Father does not condone slavery in the past or right now. His law never changes. His law is immutable and solid. It gives consequences statically and uniformly. It wasn't different in the past. There's no context that you can put these verses in that make it okay. God the Father did not condone slavery. He gave us all the exact same God-given rights, and we are born with them because we are all His children. Let's add insult to injury to that silly fable that people keep bleeding out because some big finger quotes church authority told them to take it all literally and the Bible is the immaculate inspired word of God. It ain't. Exodus 21:32. If a bull gores a male or female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave, and the bull must be stoned. More slave-owning protocols. Leviticus 25:44. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. So God the Father is saying, you may buy slaves, give me a break. And it's not only the Old Testament for those people trying to do the mental gymnastics saying, oh, well, the Old Testament, the Torah was written in a different time. God's law doesn't change. God didn't allow slavery back then, and he doesn't allow it now because it's against his law. You can't own other people. Period. The end. And for people who think that it was only the Old Testament, here's some New Testament stuff. 1 Peter 2:18. Servants, which is slaves, must be subject to your masters with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the unjust. Oh, okay, so that's inspired by God the Father. Titus 2:9. Bid slaves to be submissive to their masters, and to give satisfaction in every respect. They are not to be refractory, nor to pilfer, but to show entire and true fidelity. Right. Every once in a while I'll read those off, and I wasn't even done with all of the multiple verses that condone slavery, going directly against God the Father's law. Occasionally I'll read them off just to remind people that it ain't my opinion that the Bible is not the immaculate and inspired Word of God. It's absolutely true. God's truth. Go cry in your milk about it. Go listen to people petting your ears with a bunch of absolute fantasy lies if you want to, but that stuff is in the Bible, and that equals that it is not inspired, nor is it immaculate. So what Christians after the ancient teachings do is we do objective Bible study, reading it cover to cover to see what's in there, and not looking at it with awe and reverence, because it ain't a magical item like out of Dungeons and Dragons. It's not that. It doesn't have its own power. All the silly movies out there, that's fantasy. Just forget about it, because it ain't true. Where people are holding holy relics as if they have some sort of power. They don't. The power is inside of you, because God the Father has an eternal connection to you. You're one of his children. He has his Holy Spirit, your guardian angel, the real you, inside that temporary physical expression, and you're going to have many, many more. And I only read you the verses that have to do with slavery. There are plenty more that go directly against God's immutable law. If you're behaving morally and carefully, you're going to get consequences that are favorable to you. The condition out there becomes one of freedom and love. If you behave immorally and carelessly, then you get a condition of slavery and fear out there. That's how God's law operates. When we get into the Ten Commandments, we'll hold that beside God's actual immutable law and see how many of them have anything to do with God's law. Since we're going to be finishing up Genesis pretty soon here, it's been a long road. A lot of interesting Elohist source stuff in the very beginning, and then a lot of allegory following the allegorical figures of Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Jacob, Joseph. Keep in mind that we have zero archaeological cross-referenced evidence that any of these allegorical figures actually existed as Adam human beings. Not my opinion. This is why I'm bringing the old stuff back, Christian warriors, because what the parasite class has done to Christianity makes me a little angry. And it's not helping people. It's not helping the condition out in the world either. If it were, we'd see a different world out there, wouldn't we? They've had 1,600 years warping people's minds on their fake version of Christianity, and it's time to bring the old stuff back. It's time to uphold personal responsibility, understand what God's law actually is, so we can behave morally. No more nonsense, no more fantasy. This ain't my new take on Christianity, it's the old stuff, because ancient Christians taught responsibility, they taught taking action. And the more I come direct to the public like this, the more I hemorrhage people actually listening. And that's fine. For all I know, I got about 50 people in the congregation. They may all be CIA and FBI plants, just making sure I don't get any traction. They may all be just a bunch of Satanists cracking up laughing as I'm trying to set the record straight, and they know that everyone's been so hopelessly conditioned, emotionally conditioned, to blindly accept authority and what their word is versus what is right in front of us, what we're reading. So let's get into our objective Bible study. We're going to be doing Genesis 50 today, and like I do in the recent sermons, we're going to let the KJV buddy, the King James Version buddy, read off the entire chapter, all the these and thous of the King James Version, at a quicker pace, and then we'll dig in with the New Living Translation. But, Christian Warriors, if there's anything in the King James Version that needs attention drawn to it, you can bet I'll be bringing it up. I understand the these and the thous and that whole old English language is tedious for most people who do not enjoy studying the Bible like I do. So we're going to give all of you a break and let the King James Version buddy read off Genesis 50. Take it away, KJV buddy.
Chapter 50. And Joseph fell upon his father's face, and wept upon him, and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. And the physicians embalmed Israel. And 40 days were fulfilled for him, for so are fulfilled the days of those which are embalmed. And the Egyptians mourned for him 60 days. And when the days of his mourning were past, Joseph spake unto the house of Pharaoh, saying,
If now I have found grace in your eyes, speak, I pray you, in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, Lo, I die in my grave which I have digged for me in the land of Canaan. There shalt thou bury me. Now therefore let me go up, I pray thee, and bury my father, and I will come again.
And Pharaoh said,
Go up, and bury thy father, according as he made thee swear.
And Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, and all the house of Joseph and his brethren and his father's house. Only their little ones and their flocks and their herds they left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond Jordan. And there they mourned with a great and very sore lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning in the floor of Atad, they said,
This is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians.
Wherefore the name of it was called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan. And his sons did unto him according as he commanded them. For his sons carried him into the land of Canaan, and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham bought with the field for a possession of the burying place of Ephron the Hittite, before Mamre. And Joseph returned into Egypt, he and his brethren, and all that went up with him to bury his father, after he had buried his father. And when Joseph's brethren saw that their father was dead, they said,
Joseph will peradventure hate us, and will certainly requite us all the evil which we did unto him.
And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying,
Thy father did command before he died, saying, So shall ye say unto Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren, and their sin, for they did unto thee evil. And now, we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father.
And Joseph wept when they spake unto him. And his brethren also went and fell down before his face, and they said,
Behold, we be thy servants.
And Joseph said unto them,
Fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, ye thought evil against me. But God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now therefore fear ye not, I will nourish you, and your little ones.
And he comforted them, and spake kindly unto them. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house. And Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the 3rd generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were brought up upon Joseph's knees. And Joseph said unto his brethren,
I die, and God will surely visit you, and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob.
And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying,
God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence.
So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt.
Thank you, KJV buddy. That was very entertaining. So, let's read Genesis 50. Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph told the physicians who served him to embalm his father's body. So Jacob, and they say Israel in the Old Hebrew and in the King James Version, was embalmed. And they're not really using the word embalmed in the Old Hebrew, they're saying to spice. Essentially, it just means to embalm, or was understood to be the embalming process where they add a bunch of spices, take the organs out, all the stuff that you know from Egyptian records, or Old Commission, the land of Kemet, Kem, or as the Canaanites knew them, which is where Israelites come from, Egypt is Mizraim to them. The embalming process took the usual 40 days, and the Egyptians mourned his death for 70 days. That's a long old time. You'd figure there'd be some record of it. Well, there is not. This is the only one. We're reading it. When the period of mourning was over, Joseph approached Pharaoh's advisors and said, Please do me this favor and speak to Pharaoh on my behalf. Tell him that my father made me swear an oath. He said to me, Listen, I am about to die. Take my body back to the land of Canaan and bury me in the tomb I prepared for myself, So please allow me to go and bury my father. After his burial, I will return without delay, because remember, Joseph is still a house slave of Potiphar, also a pharaoh that cannot be cross-referenced in any Egyptian record. So as far as we know, this whole thing is allegory. It's in our consideration files. Nothing is moved to the knowledge file. In our heads. Genesis 56, Pharaoh agreed to Joseph's request. Go and bury your father as he made you promise, he said. So Joseph went to bury his father. He was accompanied by all of Pharaoh's officials, all the senior members of Pharaoh's household, and all the senior officers of Egypt. Seems like a big old procession. You'd think there'd be some record of it. Well, there is not. Continuing on, Joseph also took his entire household and his brothers and their households, but they left their little children and flocks in the herds in the land of Goshen. And remember, that's the eastern side of the Nile Delta. That area was called Goshen. A great number of chariots and charioteers accompanied Joseph. Big old party going up the coast to the land of Canaan, which is modern-day Israel area. When they arrived at the threshing floor of Atad, a threshing floor was a place where they'd separate grain from chaff, essentially, getting the seeds to fall to the bottom and have the wind blow all the chaff away, called winnowing in the old days. And a threshing floor would have to be in an area where there was always a constant wind. It would make it easier for them to do this, so that was a threshing floor. But archaeologists cannot find where the threshing floor of Atad is. And in the New Living Translation it says near the Jordan River because they want to sidestep a problem that scholars, secular, some not, have with the Old Hebrew and the King James Version, saying that it was beyond the Jordan River, and everyone's thinking, well, to get from Egypt or Old Kemet to Canaan, which is now Israel area, all you'd have to do is just go right up the coast, go heading north. You wouldn't have to cross the Jordan. So for all we know, everyone is fretting over a scribe mistake. We don't know. Wherever the threshing floor of Atad is, it's gonna have to be someplace where there's constant wind. So everyone always wrings their hands over where this place is. We don't know, because it says it's beyond the Jordan River, but why would they cross over it to just get to Canaan when all they have to do is head straight north? This is the problem you run into, mostly with scholars that are believers in allegory. They think that just because the allegory was written that it's 100% fact that it happened, and so they try and do the mental gymnastics to make it all work, when they could be looking at either an edit or some form of censorship or even an error from the old scribes that compiled, edited, censored the Pentateuch, the Torah, the Old Testament, back around 500 BC when the Israelites returned from their exile in Babylon, or at least a couple tribes did. So they could be fretting over nothing, could be a scribal error. So anyway, let's continue. Genesis 50:10. When they arrived at the threshing floor of Atad, near the Jordan River, as the New Living Translation tries to sidestep, really says beyond the Jordan River, they held a very great and solemn memorial service with a 7-day period of mourning for Joseph's father. The local residents, the Canaanites, there's a clue, must be in Canaan somewhere. Wherever this threshing floor was, the residents were Canaanites. Watched them mourning at the threshing floor of Atad. Then they renamed that place, which is near the Jordan, which it doesn't say there. New Living Translation embellishing. They named it Abel Mitzrayim, and that just means mourning of the Egyptians. Also a clear link to Abel. For they said, this is a place of deep mourning for these Egyptians. That's what the Canaanites are saying. Of this gigantic procession that we have zero cross-referenced historical record of, archaeological or written. This is the only account of this allegory. So it goes into our consideration file. Genesis 50:12 says, So Jacob's sons did as he commanded them. They carried his body to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre. Remember, we covered that last week, that no one's actually found any bones in that cave, and you're not even allowed to go in there. Because people who are believers in allegory, that is exoteric, outer teachings, religious, followers of Judaism, Catholics, modern Christians, they don't want anyone to discover that there are no bones there. This is the huge difference between exoteric believers and esoteric knowers of information, like the Christians after the ancient teachings. They know things or they don't know things, just like we do in the modern day. We Christians after the ancient teachings know stuff or we don't know stuff. There ain't no such thing as faith or belief to us. We have to put away fantasy, consider things. If we don't have evidence, we continue considering it. Strongly or not, doesn't matter, but we can't say that we know it. To know something, it has to be factually recorded, measured, known. These are ancient Christian teachings. So continuing on with Genesis 50:13, this is the cave that Abraham had bought as a permanent burial site from Ephron the Hittite. After burying Jacob, Joseph returned to Egypt with all his brothers and all who had accompanied him to his father's burial. But now that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers became fearful. Remember, we've tracked this entire story. This family that is supposedly blessed by our Father, the eternal force of love, the creator that set all things into motion. He's supposedly blessing this whole family that is doing terrible things more often than not. All of them are owning slaves. All of Joseph's brothers intended to murder him. God does not condone murder. And then they decide to sell him into slavery because Reuben pushes that idea. And keep in mind, this is including Judah. He was planning on murdering Joseph just because he had a dream where cartoony sacks of grain or bundles of wheat or corn or something were bowing to his bundle of corn or sack of wheat. They were going to kill him over that. So now they're afraid that Joseph is going to exact revenge, very rightfully, against his brothers being a bunch of scumbags in that moment of time. Now Joseph will show his anger and pay us back for all the wrong we did to him, they said. So they sent this message to Joseph. So they're basically forging a false message that they're saying came from Jacob. And here it is. Before your father died, he instructed us to say to you, please forgive your brothers for the great wrong they did to you, for their sin in treating you so cruelly. And it does not say sin there. The word is kata'ah, and that means an offense. Sin is a mistranslation. Sin used to be an old goddess in that area. Sin or Min, the namesake for the moon or minutes. So that's what sin actually is. Every time we get the word sin, it's a mistranslation. The proper translation would be an offense, not a sin. Sin was the old goddess in that area. Of course, allegorically, not a real divine feminine figure or anything like this. So we, the servants of the God of your father, and it doesn't say servant there, it says slave. Ebed is the word there translating, and they'll take Ebed and they'll translate it as servant or slave depending on what they want to sugarcoat. They being the scribes either around 500 BC or the scribes in 325 AD, 381 AD, or 1611 AD. We don't know who was doing the scribal censoring, editing errors because there were so many times in history that it was edited, censored, and possibly mistranslated. And it also does not say, of the God of thy father. It says, of the Elohim, or Elohim, which means judges, divine judges. Does not translate to singular God the Father. It translates to divine judges, plural, of Eloah. So they're essentially saying, we, the slaves of the Eloah of thy father. That's what it's actually saying. Beg you to forgive our sin, or rather our offense. So if we took all of the silly notions introduced by scribes somewhere along the line, Genesis 50:17 actually says, please forgive your brothers for the great wrong they did to you, for their offense in treating you so cruelly. So we, the slaves of the Eloah of your father, beg you to forgive our offense. When Joseph received the message, he broke down and wept. Joseph is always crying in these allegories. He cries more than any other allegorical figure. Then his brothers came and threw themselves down before Joseph. Look, we are your slaves. And guess what? They're using the same word, ebed. But now the scribes, somewhere along the line, wanted to sugarcoat slaves of the Elohim. They took the same word and translated it into slave later on in Genesis 50:18, when the brothers fall down on their knees before Joseph and say, we are your slaves. It's the same word there. So it was translated as servants in Genesis 50:17, same word, then translated into slave, the actual meaning, in Genesis 50:18. But Joseph replied, don't be afraid of me. And here they are using the word yare, which means either revere or fear. It depends on the context. Here it means fear. But in other places, you have to pay attention to the context of yare. Should it be fear or should it be revere? Reverence is not fearing. When the Bible says fear God, fear the Lord, all that stuff, they're using the same word, yare, which should be revere, show reverence for our Father, and not fear in that context. But here, they're using yare as fear. So Genesis 50:19 states, but Joseph replied, don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you? And it doesn't say God here, it says Elohim, which is divine judges, plural of Eloah. Not only that, but God doesn't punish you. His law was set into motion. It gives consequences. If you do something careless or immoral, you get harsh consequences. If you behave with apathy, ignorance, cowardice, if you behave carelessly, stupidly, immorally, that is, initiating physical harm on innocent parties, then you're going to get harsh consequences from God's immutable law. God ain't punishing you. He ain't mad at you that you did that. You're just sticking your hand in the fire, and he's watching you get the consequences from his law. And there ain't no begging that's going to get you out of those consequences either. You gotta improve your behavior. But this type of idea that God is punishing people is very typical of exoteric, outer teachings, believers in allegory, people who do not understand God's truth and God's law. The Christians, after the ancient teachings, way back thousands of years ago, provably at least from 800 BC, they didn't teach any such exoteric notions that God the Father's mad at you, or that you should be afraid of him, or anything like that. They didn't teach that. Because it's not true. It's simply very silly to think that God the Father is mad at you, or that he's out of control of Satan. He's in firm control, and he's watching everyone stick their hand in a fire, just waiting around for his children to come to understand his law and modify their behavior. But this type of notion that God is mad at people and he punishes people, this is very typical of exoteric believers in Judaism and the exoteric believers in Catholicism and modern Christianity. So that's why Joseph 50:19 reads like that, but Joseph replied, don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you? You intended to harm me, but God, Elohim, intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. No, don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children. So he reassured them by speaking kindly to them. So as the allegory goes, the big mental gymnastics, oh no, all of my brothers behaving like scumbags and initially trying to murder me, but eventually selling me into slavery, all of that was God's plan, so I could save people as a house slave of Potiphar in the future. It was all part of God's plan. That's how the allegory is reading here. So Joseph and his brothers and their families continued to live in Egypt. Joseph lived to the age of 110. Finally, we have someone in these allegories actually falling within the parameters of our Adam-human species and our expiration dates of 120 years. We don't really know if there are other types of human beings like Ish that preceded the Adam-human species 250,000 years ago, where our mitochondrial DNA stops. Not my opinion. We don't know if there were precursor species, or if there's just Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3 Adam human beings. We don't know. It's all for our consideration file until we can get into that Vatican library, which holds documents that are so old that they should prove to be pretty important. There's also a very old library in Tibet that has very important documentation on our Adam human species as well. But both of those libraries, especially the Vatican one, access is limited, and you have to wonder why. So Joseph is saying, it's okay, God the Father wanted you to try and murder me over a dream, and then he wanted you to sell me into slavery where I could become the house slave of Potiphar and divvy out grain to Canaanites and old Cometians during a big old famine in the area. Genesis 50:23 states he lived to see 3 generations of descendants of his son Ephraim, and he lived to see the birth of the children of Menashe's son Machir, whom he claimed as his own. Remember, Ephraim and Menashe aren't even, according to the recent Zionist political movement's myth of there being a Jewish race. According to that whole myth, Menashe and Ephraim aren't even Jews. Christian Warriors, I say this every week. We have DNA proof that the allegorical sons of Noah that became Canaanites, which became Israelites, the 12 tribes of Israel, are provably Caucasian. They're talking about Caucasians. Semitic line from Shem is Caucasian. Hamitic line from Ham is Caucasian. Japhetic line from Japheth is Caucasian. Black Sea area, where those people landed after the first cataclysm that added water to our planet. It ain't even my opinion. This is genetically proven now that we're talking about light-skinned people, blue eyes, blonde hair, red hair, Caucasians from the Caucasus, Black Sea area. So if there is such a thing as a Jewish race, as the political movement known as Zionism contends, then every Caucasian's a part of it. Tell that to a white power moron, and watch his head explode. When the Assyrians conquered this area, northern Israel, Old Canaan, when the Assyrians conquered that area in 720 BC, around that area, 10 tribes were said to have been lost. And 2 tribes were taken as captives into Babylon, where they had their exile and stuff like that. They basically exported anyone saying that they were Israeli, which were old Canaanites, all Caucasians, from the area. And the 10 tribes were said to have been lost, which is now genetically proven to be not lost. Because the second largest tribe of Dan, the mixed multitude, was a seafaring tribe, they easily escaped the Assyrian sacking of that whole area around 720 BC. They easily escaped. They traveled west through the Mediterranean, hit the sea, and started going north. Some of them went east through the steppes and started their way across the northern steppes to Western Europe over the course of hundreds of years. This is proven genetically, not my opinion. That's why you have areas like the Danube River from the tribe of Dan. That's why you have the Tuatha hitting the Irish coast. That's the tribe of Dan. That's why you have Denmark, which on the old maps is named Dansmark. That's why you have Old Norse myths about Odin, which was actually a tribal leader before it was deified as some allegorical godlike figure. Odin was from the Black Sea Caucasus area, and during the Assyrian sacking of that area, he moved his people north and settled on an island outside Finland. And I see a bunch of people out there using the word Zionist, and they don't know anything about it. They don't know what it is. It isn't equal to Judaism. I stand with every Hasidic Jew out there, as exoteric as they may be, in their fight against ideological Zionism. Hasidic Jews recognize that that's a big load of nonsense, and I stand with those Hasidic Jews. So being anti-Zionist isn't equal to anti-Semitism, and the people saying that they are anti-Zionist and the left-wing know-nothing groups that are protesting, saying Free Palestine and all this stuff, which is fine and good, but supporting scumbag Hamas terrorists is not. So there's a bunch of things that people are getting wrong right now in the modern day. People have to understand that Zionism does not equal Judaism. People have to understand that Hamas scumbag terrorist does not equal the rest of the men, women, and children of Palestine, or what they are calling Palestine. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. You can argue about whether Palestine exists or not all you want, but you know what group I'm talking about. So let's continue on with Genesis 50:24. And this is where we see scribes kind of interjecting into the allegory foreshadowing for what is going to happen in Exodus. We don't have any manuscripts that are from before the Common Era of 0. We don't have any manuscripts from that time. So we don't know if this was added in or what, but it sure seems like it, because listen what is said next. Soon I will die, Joseph told his brothers, but God, Elohim, will surely come to help you and lead you out of this land of Egypt. He will bring you back to the land he solemnly promised to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. This does not constitute a deed of ownership. So right here, it was Joseph who essentially sold the rest of his family or facilitated the rest of his family being enslaved by an Egyptian pharaoh. That's what it says right here. But this seems to be foreshadowing added later when they compiled the Pentateuch to give a hint to upcoming events that happen in Exodus. Genesis 50:25 states, Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath, and he said, When God comes to help you and lead you back, you must take my bones with you. So Joseph died at the age of 110. The Egyptians embalmed him, or spiced him, and his body was placed in a coffin in Egypt. And that, Christian warriors, concludes Genesis. Genesis is an awesome read. I love the Elohist source. I love the Bible. But we have to understand that this book came after Christians existed in the ancient world. Christians after the ancient teachings. They came first. The Bible didn't come first. The allegory, the legend that was built around our honored teacher Jesus Christ, that came after Christians already existed. Not my opinion. This is provably shown in our archaeological record. Despite what all the emotional conditioning is out there, that's simply God's truth. So we're getting into Exodus next week, and it's going to be a lot of fun. The story, the allegory of Exodus is absolutely enriched with occult symbolism and astrotheological symbolism. And occult means hidden. It does not mean evil. It just means hidden. That's what occult means. Like ocular, your eyeball, that's where occult comes from. I know what everyone's been taught. Leave your programming at the door. And I'll show you and prove to you that there's a ton of symbolism in Exodus. And the story itself is very, very interesting, especially when you look at the original Hebrew. But completing Genesis, now you understand what's in Genesis. Now you have all read it, you've seen the allegory for yourselves, you've seen the translations. We have to separate this idea that the Bible constitutes Christianity. No, Christianity came well before the Bible was compiled, edited, censored in so many places in our history. Provably so. Not my opinion. Christianity came first. And that's what we've got to get back to. We have to understand his truth and his law. God the Father's truth and law are immutable. The truth is simply what has happened and what is happening now. His law is what governs all behavior, even of inanimate objects. Moving around, smashing into stuff, that's all governed by God's law. That can be measured. We can recognize it. If you're dumb enough, you can experiment with it, but I suggest just getting the knowledge under your belt and behaving properly. The Bible does not constitute Christianity. Christianity came first, and we're going to get into Exodus, where a bunch of laws are laid down for the Israelites, old Canaanites. They came from Canaanite Caucasians, the Israelis. We're going to see all the laws supposedly laid down by an Eloah, one of the Elohim, or edited in there, we don't know. It's for our consideration file. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Ladies and gentlemen, that about wraps it up for this sermon. Thank you so much for being here. All of you real, true Christian warriors, that is Christians after the ancient teachings. You know I appreciate and love all of you on a spirit level, but I ain't going to take any abuse from your physical bodies, and I suggest you don't do so either. Remember that our honored teacher, Jesus Christ, said, "Forgive them, they know not what they do." That means understanding that we are all God's children. We are all born with the exact same God-given rights. We all have His Holy Spirit, our guardian angels, the real us inside these physical bodies. We are all brothers and sisters, essentially, in spirit. So we forgive each other on that level, and we love each other on that level. We have to understand that a lot of people are not listening to their guardian angel and by extension God the Father. But we hold people accountable in the physical. We hold their physical bodies accountable. We don't just let them walk all over us like a doormat. That's not what ancient Christians taught. Ancient Christianity was all about standing up to bullies, understanding what God's truth and law actually is. His law has a lot to do with standing up to bullies. So we hold people accountable. If they're spreading a bunch of nonsense, lies, fantasy, then we let God's truth be known and let the cards fall where they may. We don't let them off the hook. We counter their influence with our influence. Or we say no and put our foot down and see if they try and bring physical violation of our God-given rights to us so we can employ our self-defensive force. So we hold people accountable for their words and especially their actions. Yes, we forgive them on a spirit level, but we do not let them go violating other people's God-given rights, spreading a bunch of lie and fantasy everywhere. We don't let them off the hook for that. If we don't hold people accountable, then that condition does not change out there. You have to let the community know this person's a liar and a promise breaker. Here's the proof. Or if they're bringing physical violation of God-given rights, you stop them with your physical defensive force. That's how you hold people accountable. If they don't come to you showing proper contrition, apologizing, and most importantly, changing their behavior forever, then you don't just forgive them on a physical level. Sure, you forgive them on a spirit level, but you hold them accountable. You say, look, you're not off the hook. You actually did something wrong. If we hold people accountable, that condition changes. It's just the way God's law works. If you don't hold people accountable, the hell world continues. It gets worse. We just have to remember, as we are initiating self-defensive force, or spreading God's actual truth and exposing lies and promise breakers, in the background we have to measure that type of exposure and that type of action with the love that we show our brothers and sisters on a spirit level. It must all be tempered, but sometimes our hand must be forced, and we gotta hold people accountable in very final ways. Be a warrior. Stop being a slave and a crybaby. Stop letting people walk all over you. That's not what ancient Christians taught. They taught how to stand up to bullies, fight influence with influence, fight action with your self-defensive force. And Christian warriors, I do not lead you in prayer because I never do. That really is not my responsibility. Your relationship with your Father, revitalizing that existing connection, is your responsibility. You have to do it. That's why you go to your Father yourself. If you want a prayer example that works for me, go see chapter 18 of my book, A Return to Ancient Christianity, or listen to it for free. I think it's book reading 19. That's a good template for your consideration file. That's the one I do every day, and it is an effective tool to not only get control of the non-physical around you, but remind yourself of what your responsibility is to do as an emissary of God the Father. And don't pray to intermediaries like teachers, saints, and moms. No, even in the allegory that was written 4 times over, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, our honored teacher Jesus Christ never said, pray to me and I'll get your message to God, or stepped into the place of God. No, that's not what those allegories mean. Go back to the basics of ancient Christianity if you don't understand what I'm saying right there. He never said, pray to me and I'll get your message to God. He was very clear, saying, pray to God the Father. And that's a big differentiation between a Christian after the ancient teachings. We pray directly to our Father, and everyone else who claims it. They always pray to intermediaries, teachers, saints, and moms, and our honored teacher never said to do that. A bunch of apostles in the allegories may have said so, but they don't speak for our honored teacher, and they don't speak for God the Father. And we don't take allegory literally anyway, because we're Christians after the ancient teachings. And when you come to your Father, I'm sure you all know this, Christian warriors, you do not come to him as a begging, groveling slave. The people you should be apologizing to are the people that you've wronged. And even they're accepting your apology or not, none of that determines whether you should change your behavior forever. You should. Or your apologies mean nothing. God the Father isn't mad at you because he keeps sticking your hand in the fire, and that's an analogy for addiction, infatuation, doing careless and immoral things. He's just waiting for you to understand his law and behave properly. He's not mad at you. God the Father loves you. So don't go begging to God for forgiveness. Change your behavior forever, or else your apologies mean nothing, and apologize to those that you've wronged. That's who you apologize to. So you don't come to your Father like a begging, groveling slave. You come to him as an appreciative warrior, showing gratitude, because gratitude for all of the things that we do experience that have to do with his beautiful reality and his love, we show gratitude for. Gratitude takes the place of complaint. That's why we do it. We're not doing it for his benefit. He's not stroking any non-existent ego. He's not demanding any praise or worship. It's really his way or the highway. You either do things his way, or you get consequences from Satan, the force that he set into motion to govern careless and immoral action. It's his way or the highway. He's not mad at you. He's just waiting for you to understand. Pull your hand out of the fire. Do yourself a favor. God the Father loves you. He is not mad at you. Just remember that, Christian warrior, on the week ahead. If things are going wrong in your life, identify them. Ask for guidance on how to identify them and how to fix the problems. If you're running around praying, saying, God, I'm being the most obedient slave on the planet to all of my Satanist overlords, why aren't things easy for me? If you're praying like that, you have a lot of work to do, Christian warriors. So you have a great week ahead, and you have a great Sunday ahead of you. Why? Because you make it that way. There ain't no such thing as fate, prophecy, predeterminism, destiny, nothing like that. There's only such thing as your free will. So, be an effective Christian warrior out there. Take in knowledge, understand it, behave carefully and morally. Have a great Sunday. Have a great rest of your week. Christian warriors, I'll be back after 6 days with another sermon. I love and appreciate you all, and I'll see you soon.